listening to Radio Sputnik. Telling the untold.
Fault lines.
Live from across the divided states of America, it is time now for another hour, another edition, and another week of the most disruptive show covering news, politics, and events from across these disunited states of America and the increasingly divided surface of our globe. In the independent corner, I'm your political analyst, Shane Stranahan.
And in the left corner, I am the indefatigable, a burning ember in the darkness, your political analyst, Jamarl Thomas.
And together we are Fault Lines with Thomas and Stranahan.
All right, let's get to some headlines. In the news, about 5,371 new COVID cases were reported in the United States yesterday, although this weekend was the 4th, and there were about 41 new deaths. Over the past week, there's been an average of about 11,797 cases per day, an increase of 5% from the average 2 weeks earlier. 47% of the total American public has been fully vaccinated, and 55% of residents have received at least one dose. As of this morning, the coronavirus has infected about 33,690,446 human beings across the United States and has killed 604,793 people. The UK's Health Secretary, Saeed Javad, has warned of a possible 100,000 new cases per day in Britain may be coming this summer. This comes as Boris Johnson has confirmed that most mandates are being undone. In July, if I'm not mistaken. The rest of the Florida condo building was demolished this Sunday as local authorities still struggle to unearth the remains or the remaining victims of the condo collapse. This comes as Hurricane Elsa bears down on the region. The Taliban have continued to capture territory in Afghanistan, seizing more than 10 districts in 24 hours. The troops are advancing rapidly as NATO forces withdraw. In fact, the NATO forces or U.S. forces withdrew from Bagram Air Force Base, did not tell the people in Afghanistan, and the base got looted. I believe it was Bagram. I need to check, make sure off the top of my head. But yes, the Taliban are taking territory. World oil prices have reached their highest level since 2014. This follows a failure between most of OPEC to come to an agreement on an increased output of oil despite surging demands. Prices have risen to nearly $77 a barrel. The former challenger to Belarusian President Viktor Babarika, thank you, has been sentenced to 14 years in prison. Authorities in Nigeria's Kaduna state have ordered all schools to close following a mass abduction of 100 children. Once again, this weekend.
Yeah.
Once again. Those are your headlines. You're listening to Fault Lines with Thomas and Stranahan. Yeah, once again, they were abducted. That's great. That's unfortunate. And yeah, they're closing schools, I suppose, to make sure they are safe. One of the other stories that I thought was interesting. So it says troops flee as Taliban take districts in northeast Afghanistan. And it's basically talking about the Taliban's march through Afghanistan now that the U.S. is leaving. That is like, all right, the U.S. is leaving, they're leaving this base, they're leaving that base, and the Taliban is like, all right, great, we're taking. I mean, because it takes a while for troops to leave. And so it's not like, they could just pick up and walk away. And in the context of those troops walking away and leaving, well, at that point, there's a power vacuum. The Taliban knows there's going to be a power vacuum, and they are the most organized, and they take it. Now, the catch is the government using the military equipment that the U.S. is leaving behind in the military bases, are they going to be able to hold Afghanistan? Or are those bases going to end up Taliban property? I think it's the latter.
It's probably going to be the latter. But if the government that was bequeathed these U.S. armaments, if they can't maintain them, then you doubt that the Taliban can either. This is a conversation we had with Scott. It's not the case. Sure, we give them these weapons, but if we don't have engineers there on site to keep them up to date, to keep them maintained, to keep them operational, those kinds of things, then they're going to stop working. And the guess is they would not work as well for the current government as they would for the Taliban government, which just means it's a waste of money, you know, and a waste of productivity and all this stuff. The Bagram Air Base, the looting of that you mentioned, to be clear, the looting, which, you know, has come out within the last day, basically, after we withdrew from the base, come out that it was
Bagram. It was Bagram.
It was Bagram. That's what I'm saying.
Just making sure.
It turns out that was not the Taliban that did that.
No. That was just people.
You might think, okay, the Taliban are these insurgents.
No,
they're the bad guys.
Who were there, right?
Exactly.
Random people.
But no, it's just random people, which is also kind of another side of the problem. If you leave a power vacuum, like you said, the Taliban is the most organized. But what you leave when you leave a power vacuum, broadly speaking, is a kind of chaos, where the least organized are also going to want things too. They're also going to be pushing for it. That's going to, you know, further disorganize things. That's what we see now. My point is, with the looting, not going to be the first looting we see.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of disorganized response to a withdrawal that's just going to set it up for an easier takeover by the Taliban, is the assumption, months down the line, maybe weeks even, you know?
I mean, the catch becomes, can the government maintain their status?
No.
And the wild part is, it's like we've been there for 20 years and we've been putting trillions into the government and everything else, and it's going to collapse as soon as we leave. That's a failure, man. That is a failure on so many levels. And you think, how many people died doing that? How much blood and treasure did you put into that and maintaining that? And now you're leaving that. And it's like, okay, what was the point? What was the point? Like, when you think back, like, even for the Vietnam War, I mean, I think there needs to be some analysis as, okay, did we get out of this what we believe we were going to get out of this? And you may have the optimistic neocon that says, well, we just needed to do something different. If we would have moved this chair or moved that deck chair, we would have had a different result where the government would have came out and it would have been like a little democracy. And I don't think that's true. This was another failure in government building on some level, even, at least on an overt level, right? I mean, regardless of whatever they were trying to do behind the scenes of using it as a prop to go through the other countries and everything else. On an overt level, the point was we're building Afghanistan to prevent terrorists from using it as a haven to attack America, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That was the entire point of basically destroying countries for what was supposedly an attack by a group. 20 years, trillions of dollars. Trillions of dollars. How many lives? Hundreds of thousands of Afghani lives? Several thousand American lives? And at the end of that process, your government, once again, just like Vietnam, probably complete with the helicopter on the roof as Afghanis reach forward because they were, you know, helping Americans there and they know what's going to happen next. And they're like, oh my God, the Americans are leaving. Oh my God, we put our lot in and we are stuck here. It's going to be that. And it's like, at the end of that, what did you get? What did you get? And is it worth everything that is accrued for it? Meaning, if at the end of this process, we're leaving, great. And you tally up, all right, this many people died, this many Afghanis, this many Americans, this many cats and dogs killed, et cetera, et cetera. And then you tally up, all right, this is how much money we spent and everything else. And whatever that intangible thing is, you compare it to end result. Is it worth it? And the answer, of course, is no. It wasn't worth it.
No, but
it's never worth it.
But there are a couple of layers of like unintended consequences or something like that here that I'll get. We only have so much time. I'll get into briefly, but that make it a lot more difficult to talk about. So even if you're looking at it from the like brightest eyed of neocons perspectives, think about like your bushy tailed, like red nosed neocon who like genuinely believes in these things, genuinely believes, okay, America, we're the democracy in the world. We can make other countries democracies too. That's going to be better for their citizens, right? Because they're currently living under totalitarian or authoritarian governments. What we want is to give them a say. So we go in.
That's the narrative.
That's the narrative. We're the bastion of this stuff. We go in and we try to intervene, quote unquote, or whatever. We try to get involved to help these people. Yeah. That's the sort of internalized narrative here. Now, if you took that seriously, you could stipulate maybe in some cases, theoretically, you could make that work. You can, hedge your doubts or whatever. I can have my doubts about that. Hedge your bets. But the assumption is for some people, maybe they can make that work. The problem, if you set aside how that's unlikely to work completely, the problem is we don't even follow through on that.
Right.
When we go into Afghanistan, we're not genuinely doing it. That is the narrative. That's the rhetoric. But like you can see it, after 20 years, admittedly a long time, we pull out. But even going into in there in the first place, what was it supposed to be? It was supposed to be a pushback against 9/11 and an attempt to prevent anything like that from happening in the future. And of course, that spilled over very quickly into the Iraq War. Then that sort of more realpolitik outlook of things, add in oil, add in money. There are other very important components to it too. It's not just national security. We like added a veneer of humanitarianism onto it or whatever with the neocon angle. The problem is that was always and only ever a veneer. We're never going to follow through on it, which isn't good in a couple of ways, but at the very least, it just means it makes it kind of hard to talk about. It makes it a little bit difficult to talk about, because when people are talking about like, okay, it could never work or it could never have worked. I think I agree with you, but the problem is I don't even think we were trying for that in the first place. In other words, I don't know if it could have worked, but it's clear to me that that's not what we were going for. That wasn't the objective. That wasn't the objective. That was just the rationalization, the stated rationalization to sort of clothe the emperor or whatever while you allow him to do what he wants to do.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, it's stark and it's stunning. I mean, you've had the Iraq War that I don't know anyone that says, yes, that was a great success. I don't know anybody who says that, right? And now you have Afghanistan. And I don't know of anybody who's going to say that's a great success. And it should be, on some level, does the country recognize that? Meaning, does the public get that in a gut way where it's like, all right, the next time something like this comes up, we're going to be against it because we were in there for 20 years and we were in there for X amount of time. We spent $7 trillion on this particular enterprise. We lost 4,000 Americans. There were 1 million except Iraq. Meaning, is that ledger there? And does that ledger dig in America in a way where we're like, okay, that was not good. Let's not repeat that. Or is it the next conflict? Oh, we need to go there now because we're exceptional and we can determine, we can tell people how they need to live, et cetera, because we know. I mean, we just had a butcher tip. I mean, for God's sake. I mean, in the overt sense of things. And yet we're telling other people how they should live their life. I mean, we're still acting like Juan Guaido has some relevance in Venezuela. Like, this stuff is insane in the way that we operate. And so hopefully, if nothing else, I would hope that it leaves a bad taste in our mouth in the sense of, okay, let's not do that again. If we want a nation build, we can nation build at home. There were trillions of dollars that we spent there.
We try to nation build at home all the time. That has not worked out either. That's not been working well. And arguably, we just haven't done a good,
seen the nation building at home.
Good enough job of it. I hear you. Well, culturally, with their whole culture war thing, you could argue that those are attempts by the U.S. government to nation build at home, resolve cultural differences. I don't know. But that's another conversation, kind of. But, yeah. There's somewhere I was going with this.
Yeah.
With nation building, getting involved overseas, the problem is this: where I was going. The baby boomers, man. Isn't it the case that like you had a generation of people who in their teens and their most idealistic years opposed the Vietnam War, who are now pretty much bought in hook, line, and sinker to the idea that Orange Man bad, therefore war good, whatever, something. You know what I mean? That the intelligence
like,
community.
I'm opposing the thing that I dislike, even if the thing that I dislike is on some level
Plenty
good.
of people, like an entire generation of people who are pretty skeptical and open-eyed about the JFK assassination, who are like cynical about the CIA, saw what happened with the church committee, kind of screwed over by the 70s, a little bit more excited in the 80s, but just, even though the baby boomers are doing well economically, they seem to have like a somewhat skeptical view of government, particularly of war. If you think of like the left-wing baby boomers, and yet the tide turns or something like that, and they throw their lot in with whatever. You get my point.
Yeah, I get your point.
And now we're for war again. And now that's a single generation. That's about the maximum period of like certain memory in humanity. In other words, we will forget something that happens in the course of our own life. We're pretty likely to remember. Past that, all bets are off. Who knows? But even those people.
Yeah, I mean, even within the course of our own life, does it change? Yeah. I mean, maybe. I mean, because Trump got elected, and Trump got elected on this kind of against this kind of war stuff. So there's that. So maybe, I don't know. I mean, it does seem like, weirdly enough, elements of the right and certain elements of the left are like, okay, we don't like this war stuff. We need to stop that.
Yeah.
We can fight internally, but we need to stop that. So much money. I just keep thinking of the amount of money we spent over there. Trillions of dollars. Like trillions of dollars. And the report in the Afghan files made the point of saying how we're putting that money into like people with mud huts. So it's not like you're spending $1 trillion into, let's say, Washington, D.C., where, okay, we're going to update this, we're going to build this, we're going to have high-tech rail, we're going to all that stuff. No, you're talking about, like, mud huts. And it's like it built in corruption at that point. And at the point where you built in the corruption, the public didn't trust the government. And so, yeah, the soldiers aren't fighting for a government that they think is ridiculously corrupt and backed by U.S. interests. Shocker. Shocker.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, they're shocked by that. All right, let's do this. Let's take a break. You guys are listening to Fault Lines with Thomas and Stranahan. We will be back in a moment.
lines.
Want to know how international issues fit into local ones and how local issues fit into international ones? With the historical context to tie them together? Well, we're bringing it to you all by any means necessary. Tune in weekdays from 2 to 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to hear me, Jackie Lukman, alongside my co-host, Sean Blackman. By any means necessary, your guide to connecting the social, political, and economic movements shaping the world around us.
Fault lines.
Welcome back to Fault Lines on Radio Sputnik. My name is Jamarl Thomas. I'm joined with my co-host Shane Stranahan, coming to you live out of our station in Washington, D.C. If you guys live in the area, you can catch us on radio at 105.5 FM and 1390 AM. We're also in Kansas City at 102.9 FM and 104.7 FM. If you're digging what Shane and I are putting down, whatever platform you're consuming this content on, give us a like and share that audio or video. If you want to join in on the conversation, you can send us a chat, a tweet, and of course, you can reach us by phone at 202-521-1320. That is 202-521-1320. Your engagement helps make this show what it is, so definitely don't be shy. Let's go this way with it. Last week, I think it was Monday. Today is Tuesday, but we had a day off. We covered the report that was released by the Director of National Intelligence on basically UFOs saying, hey, this is real and we need more information on it. And again, this is on an overt level in regards to this is what's the story, this is the narrative. This is real. We need to get rid of the giggle factor because it's hurting our ability to get information. This is technology and it is doing things that may be a disruptive technology. We don't know where it comes from. And it could be a foreign adversary or it could be something else. It's basically the report in a nutshell. Now, when you get to the people who are talking about the classified part, you get those people who get deeper into it. Let's say like Ratcliffe or Romney or Marco Rubio, where they say, yeah, we've seen the classified stuff. We don't think it's Russia or China. Now, at this point, you're like, okay, you've taken a lot of stuff off that table. And have you really engaged what you're saying? Somebody asked me and they said, look, how do you get this across to the left? Why doesn't the left care about this? I mean, if you look and think about it, a lot of the people we're talking about are right-wing sources. There was a Democrat that just came out that said that we need to have congressional investigations. And you're probably going to get those because the government is taking it seriously. And what I mean by taking it seriously, they've already have a head of the UAP task force that has been formalized as a mission. The agencies, all of these other federal agencies, alphabet soups, are going to be basically feeding information into this particular source. The government says we don't know what it is, but we need to investigate. We need to figure out what it is. If it's an adversary, oh my God. Hopefully it's not an adversary. But the adversary part is open. It's open. It doesn't make the assumption on some level that it's China and Russia. On some level, some of these things are. But just like D.N.I. Ratcliffe made the point of saying, yeah, we're not stupid. We eliminated that stuff out. We're not going to come out with this report if we didn't necessarily believe that there was a there. That's astonishing. Your world has fundamentally changed. What I mean by that, and I guess the way to try to explain it to the left, to bookend, I guess, the report going a week out, is that the context of your world has changed. What has been allowed in your world has expanded instantaneously, and you just haven't been aware of it. You just haven't noticed. If they're going to put on the table that there is a there and that they've been lying for 70 years, what does that mean? What does that mean? What does it mean to have lied for 70 years about a phenomena and then come out and say, okay, now you can trust us, despite the fact that we've lied for 70 years? If it is indeed a threat, then that threat has been going on for a very long time. What have you done about that, quote unquote, threat? How long have you known about that quote-unquote threat? Did you alert the president about that quote-unquote threat? Did you think you needed to alert the public of that quote-unquote threat? Which country do you think that threat comes from? How do you think they got the disruptive technology? Why is it that the disruptive technology is used explicitly in the ship or in the device, and yet it's not anywhere in the context of the country itself.
Their economy, that kind of thing.
Or the economy, exactly. You need to explain that. And I'm saying, regardless of what it is, my position has always been, I don't know what it is. We need to research and figure out, even though I think it's both. It's a public position, if you want, versus this is what I think. This is, where I can stand and defend. But the government has a lot of explaining to do. And from the standpoint of the left, when you're looking at this stuff, you don't have to look at it and say they're aliens. The only thing you need to look and say, oh my God, there's a there. And whatever that there is, it's a paradigm shift. It's a paradigm break. And what I'm saying is, because it breaks our paradigm, that is something that is a big, big deal either way. Meaning, if it is indeed us, it still breaks our paradigm in regards to what's being described. And if it is not us, oh my God. In either scenario, both breaks paradigms and both are on the table. That's profound. And the implications of that are profound. I mean, even if you want to say the technology in and of itself and what the technology can do and what they're describing, that's astonishing in regards to what it means for our world. And I'm telling you, the people who are looking at the classified data don't think it's us. That needs to be engaged. And you need to sit in there for a bit. And you need to sit in there for a bit for the implications. What does it mean? What does it mean to have a country? What does it mean for America when you find out there's something else? And this is not even you engaging something else. This is one investigation after the next, which is exactly what they were going to do. You're going to get your congressional investigations. You're going to get one report after the next. There's another report that's expected, I think, in 90 days. All of the stuff I predicted in this way. And until they get to the last straw, they're like, we don't think it's us because of XYZ. And we've given you all of these reports. And you've had all of these hearings. You've been desensitized all thoroughly. And we don't think it's us. I think it's going to be that. And look, if it is that, those are things that you need to figure out in regards to the larger implications and ramifications. Because what that means is, just on that information alone, what happens? You are going to need a super governmental body. Meaning, what does it mean when your world finds out that you are no longer the center of the universe? Now, I think the first year is probably going to be, wow, that's phenomenal. But then it's reconciling the mechanics of what has to happen. For example, how does the fence take it? There's something in our space. Meaning, even in the best of terms, under the best of ideals, with the best of people looking at the situation, there's something in our airspace we can't defend against. We need to figure out how it works, and we need to figure out the physics and the science. And they will, because human beings are creative. And you've basically given an answer to a question that didn't even know existed in many respects. And that stuff is going to express itself in regards to science, technology, engineering. It is going to express itself in what it means in a political sense of countries and what is a country in the context of something else that is engaging us as a world. What's the transition like in the context of a country becoming integrated into a global system, because it has to be in order to interact? I'm saying that these are heavy questions, even in the way that it is presented and the way that people engage it. If somebody is going on Fox News screaming that aliens attacked America, I'm going to say the person is hysterical. And that right there is part of the fear also. The reason I'm doing this monologue is because what I realize is that the government has put people in a ludicrous position. Hey, those UFOs, they're real. They're real. And they're invading our national security space. And we don't know what they are, et cetera, et cetera. But what do you mean? You're telling us that UFOs are real, but you're not giving us any information on it? So yes, this black box of all possibilities that we've talked about for the last 70 years is real. No, as the government of the United States, we will not give you any additional information on it. We're not even going to give you the classified data. That's ridiculous and insane. And that is untenable as a position to take. Yes, there have been failures at that case. Yes, there seem to have been lies on a large level. What did you know? When did you know it? And why are you expressing this stuff now? Why is this coming out right now? I have all sorts of fears associated with this. Because, look, whatever I think in regards to is true, I don't think we're going to get true. I think we're going to get partial truth. And any political situation like normal, I think it is going to be shaped around a particular narrative. Whatever that narrative is, I have no idea. it seems that this is being managed on some way, which means, okay, if this is being managed in the way that it is being rolled out, it could be for the better or for the worse. I have no idea, because it's a black box. And the government not giving information allows it to be a black box and allows it to be cast as something else. Meaning you don't want a situation of somebody coming and saying aliens are eating babies and the government is working with them to help guard the babies. Like, oh my God, and you get 5% of the population screaming that and acting like that. You don't want that. But you get crazy, kooky conspiracy theories when the government doesn't seem to be coming clean. You've just told us the profound is true, but we don't want to give you any additional information on the profound being true. You just have to take our word for it. It's even being cast in the context of the national security state. All of that stuff is true. That said, there could be a there to it, and I think there is. And I think the government on some level is coming clean about it, kind of. But we are so in the dark, and that is the problem. You can't tell people that this is real and stop there. You got to give them something else. Shane, you know, we were talking before about Greer's film and how, like, you know, you go for like 2 years where you have all of this info release and you have some people to come forward. And yeah, they're spooks, right? I mean, you're talking about the government and you're talking about national security and intelligence and everything else, and the spooks come forward. And then you have all of these videos being released. And yes, if the video is released, I consider a video release just like we consider leaks under normal circumstances. Okay, somebody is putting out a leak for a specific reason for some objective effect in the world. And so, but in the UFO community is different, because they're like, oh, somebody gave us a leak. We're so excited that we got something to show the public to try to prove and give evidence to realness. Well, you've already been confirmed. So the part of confirming realness has already been established on some level, even though it's not real in the objective sense of the way that we operate our life, etc. But this, like, you have to give people more. You can't leave it at that. You can't say, yeah, this profound thing is real, but okay, we're leaving there. People, I'm sorry, it goes into conspiracy. And the moment that people get to this win that, oh my God, this is real, like real in a real sense, and you leave them in the dark, oh, that is horrendous. That is horrendous. I mean, what are your thoughts? I mean, for me, that's a horrible place to be. You can't leave people in the dark after telling them something like this, because other ideas may take hold.
I'll try to be direct, because I often sort of set up the issue and speak about the issue and therefore prevaricate in a way that I don't intend to. And part of that, what makes this issue difficult to talk about is that the intelligence community
is shaping the context.
Yeah,
it's entirely shaped around national security.
A lot of people who listen to the show particularly are by default going to distrust them. And you kind of wanted to distrust them. And in a way, they're like posting their L here. Yeah. They're posting their loss. They're saying, guys, we don't understand what this is. This has surpassed us. This is above us. This is beyond us, and we need your help. In some sense, that's posting an L, right, in a very meme-y, like general layman's term kind of thing. Whatever.
Posting an L.
Exactly. That is kind of what they're doing with this. They're saying we lost this one, and we need your help. We need your funding. Whatever. Now, if you take them on the best good faith interpretation, again, like bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, red-cheeked CIA agent. They're just here to do the best. That kind of thing. What would they want here? If they are desensitizing the public, now setting that all up, we're bound to sort of distrust them with good reason, but it's also weird because they're posting about things they ostensibly don't know. Right. They're showing some weakness here, which makes me a little bit more inclined to trust them in a weird way, because it's like, okay, you guys are fessing up. Okay, well, let's hear what you have to say. That kind of thing. Setting that all up. Having said that, if they are desensitizing us to the idea that aliens do exist, that's not going to happen immediately. Right. They're not going to drop the hammer. They're not going to be like, yo, guys, revelation, aliens, boom. No. They're going to tease it out. They're going to just confirmation. Like George R.R. Martin or some other story writer, whatever. They're going to put together a teased narrative to get people more and more open to it. Yeah. And ideally, that way, instead of going through the stages of grief, the 5 stages of grief, which start with denial and shock, by the way, and which would saturate the atmosphere of our response to it for a while yet. They're just teasing it out. They're sort of getting us used to it. And then people eventually start to ask more questions. We can't, the questions that you're asking, why, how, what, people aren't there yet. Those kinds of things. People aren't there yet. Yeah. Once we start formalizing those questions, for one thing, we have to take their word at it. And this is another thing. We have to take their word at it. A lot of people are bound to not take their word at it because we don't trust them. Right. So it's all complicated to talk about. You know what I mean?
And because it's so in the dark, it's like, where's the floor? It's like, where's the floor? Like, what's real in this? It's like, do they really not know? Yeah. And in the context of, do they really not know? Because again, Radcliffe and all these other guys was like, Yeah, that's not Russia and China. I mean, this stuff goes back to like the 40s. Like we're talking about stuff where they're like the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, et cetera.
Yeah.
And you would have to believe that they had that technology, or for that matter, we did back then. So it's that, you know, starting off when these guys are looking at the classifieds and they're thinking, we don't know how that works from a physics perspective. So they're like, all right, this doesn't look like it's us. But if they know that or they believe it, then that means that this is being managed on some way to say, okay, we're going to keep this to keep us area down, et cetera. And like you said, tease this stuff out.
You would hope so. If this were intentional, if they had an inkling that this was aliens, and they were like,
that's the catch.
They're trying to play the, not the intermediary or something, but you get my point.
Yeah, we're trying to bring the public in on this reality of things without having.
They have more information than we do. They're trying to selectively disclose with some good faith. Yeah. Okay, let's make this work. That kind of thing. Let's make this work. Let's try to make this transition feasible.
We have no idea.
You're the kid, Jamarl, at the front of the class who already knows the textbook, has already read the textbook, and wants to get into the things that the professor is like, okay, slow down, Jamarl. The other kids aren't ready for that quite yet. Let's take a breathe.
I feel you. It's just the moment that you disclose one, everything else falls out. And I think it's people and the public hasn't internalized what it means. I think it's that. Meaning, I don't have to say it's aliens. I don't even need to go there. I just need to go and say, hey, there's a there there. That's all I need. The question needs to be answered. What is it? And then if it's us, fair enough, but it's us breaking a paradigm. I'm making the point that a paradigm in regards to the way we understand our world has been broken regardless.
Yeah.
And that's a big deal. Like what falls out of that. And yeah, like I said, if it's us, it is weirder if it's us.
It is in
if
a
you
weird,
think of if you think about it.
And in my opinion, the biggest way in which it's weirder, if it is us, it's like the secrecy and like you asked, why is this stuff not leached over into our economy? Why have we not osmosis?
It's like a secret economy of some stuff. It's very weird.
It doesn't seem to be used unless this is like the kind of thing they use in laboratories that we don't even know how to pronounce the names of, that kind of thing, doing weird high-tech research. Maybe it's in our smartphones. I mean, I'm speaking in the most general, stupid terms about this, but you get my idea. Yeah. Unless somehow secretly it has leaked over, if it's us.
Yeah.
The question
I know
is,
what you mean.
Why hasn't it?
Like transistors and that type of stuff. Yeah.
Because it seems like, we could do, broadly, humanity likes, advancing technologically. We like getting better at doing things with less inefficiency.
Wish I knew what was going on behind the scenes. I mean, even the stuff with Daniel Sheehan, Elizondo, and that type of stuff, even that gets weird. Like this shadow boxing, the stuff that Sheehan is saying behind the snes about what Elizondo believes.
Yeah, you're talking about, that's inside baseball.
That's his lawyer. I'm sorry.
You're talking inside baseball.
Sheehan is Elizondo's lawyer. That was one with the Ellsberg and the...
And Elizondo, I know, Lou Elizondo, former director of ATIP, one of the big guys who's come out recently at ATIP, the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, which is like this sort of Pentagon's, I think it was started outside the Pentagon and moved under the Pentagon and operated as a technically open program that they didn't really talk about until it got more wider press treatment recently.
And right, exactly. And they were studying UFOs. That was his thing. That's the way he explains the program. It's weird because the Pentagon explains it slightly differently in the way they talk about it. But they've had multiple stories about this program that should be easy to explain. But yeah, man, it's very weird. It's very interesting. Oh yeah, we need to close. It's very weird. It's very interesting. This community has gotten really I don't want to say drama. Drama is the wrong word for it. It's just because so much emphasis is now all of a sudden been put on it. It's like, all right, you guys are now legitimate. Go from here. and it's like this conceptual stuff that you guys used to think of. Yeah. This is now legitimate. Meaning this is real world phenomena. Your government is now responding as if it's a real thing. And because of that, money that's allocated, meaning research money, all of that stuff becomes in play and legitimate studying this particular topic.
But it sounds like there's a bit of a gray area because if you talk about like aliens generally, I feel like that's even still a little bit taboo.
Well, you just need to say there's something in our airspace we don't know what it is.
I know.
It's just that
you Jamarl, you have the advantage to be like, okay, this is the way to talk about it.
Yeah,
that's sort of
it's just the question.
Safe or constructive or something like that, or skeptical, reserved enough that people aren't going to assume that you're crazy. My point is that there's like a vast space that's been opened up that is now gray area that was previously unquestionably taboo. Like, okay, if you start talking about that, you're a little bit weird. You start talking about aliens in general. Now it's like, okay, I don't know exactly where that is. And I always forget the name.
Because it's very strange.
Like, I always think of Ashkenazi, but it's Anunnaki, I think it is. If people start bringing up like, okay, are they crazy?
That's my point.
You get what I'm saying. There's like a space that's been opened up.
Because it's like, from my standpoint, my argument is always go as far as you can defend.
Yeah.
That's all, And if I always say, I think it's us and not us. The catch becomes, okay, but you've now have told people for 70-something years that this wasn't real. And now you're saying, okay, it's real. Okay, so if you lied to us for 70 years, what's true? And then you get, because if you notice, none of the people want to talk about what's in it. Like meaning we can't ascertain its intent. Okay, in order to ascertain intent on some level, you have to figure out what's in it. Meaning what is in the head of the thing that's controlling the thing that you're looking at, trying to ascertain its intent. Never talk about it, never bring it up. That's not where they want to go. There's technology. We don't know what the technology is doing. We need to figure out what it is. We need more research. That's it. What's in it? Yeah. We're going to call it a night. It's that, right?
Yeah.
They don't want to touch that because that part is weirder. Like you said, it's one thing to say, okay, there's technology doing something. Fair enough. People can look at that. People can say, okay, that's interesting. When you get into, okay, what's in it? That gets more interesting. That gets weirder. And so they have stayed away from that. They seem to have made a conscious choice not to touch that. If you notice, none of them bring that up. Rubio, Elizondo, none of them bring that up. It doesn't come up. It doesn't come up for an explicit purpose and reason.
Actually investigating the material technologies they would have harvested or whatever.
Well, right. That's what they overtly talk about. Meaning they've made a choice. They don't want to talk about what's in the craft. It's weirder. Like you said, it's like, because at that point you're talking about aliens. If you're just talking about technology, that's different. I know it sounds strange, but that's the same reason why they had UAP versus UFO. They're like, okay, we're going to change the way people think about it and remove the attachments that are already there with the word UFO. So we're going to change the word UAP.
Totally.
Stuff.
Yeah. Well, but even then the UFO to UAP thing used to make less sense to me until I just thought it over a little bit more. And I'm like, technically, a lot of these sightings, you don't know if these are objects.
Exactly.
These could be phenomena. It could be
phenomena.
It could be St. Elmo's fire or whatever weird aerial phenomena, visual, optical illusion, that kind of thing. That started to make more sense to me.
Not to mention it goes beyond craft.
Yeah, but here's the other thing. This is where there's a bit of, I don't know if this is plausible deniability, if this is like a stalking horse they're using, or if they're just genuinely uncertain. Yeah. A good reason to keep the technology and the details about how the tech works from coming out is if this is another human threat, if this is an anthropogenic threat, if it's Russia or China or one of these other nations. Now, if it is, we don't necessarily want them to know which craft we've downed and retrieved, even though they theoretically would already, because they might have tracking, whatever. We might not want them to know that. And or we're just saying that kind of thing because, people will know that we might not want to disclose this stuff if it's another human being. And what we really don't want to do is disclose all the weird tech
you're doing right now
that we've discovered.
Think about what you're doing right now.
I'm looking at like double motivation.
Exactly,
and
because
all
it's in the dark. That's my point.
Because it's in the dark and we don't know if we can trust it.
But there's no transparency associated with this issue. And so you're stuck. We're all stuck with that.
But based on what they've said, there shouldn't be, because this is a national security threat, and that's the rub.
Yeah, it's so wild. It's so. They have to expose and be more transparent with this. Period. And I get that they want to slow walk it. Fair enough. I get that they want to be like, okay, we don't know what it is. We don't know what it is. Technology, et cetera, et cetera. Fair enough. I accept that. And I even accept the slow walk, right? I accept all that. I appreciate it coming out. That's the catch. What I don't appreciate or what I don't know is its kind of motivations. And it's the motivations that get me. I don't know the reasons.
What about this? Do you think that internally, let's say for a second, they don't know what it is right now. They are themselves genuinely in the dark.
Also.
Yeah,
right.
But they managed to procure funding. They've set up their larger X-Files style division to do investigations into this stuff, and they find out definitively that at least some of this stuff is extraterrestrial in origin.
Right.
Do you think right now, your opinion, they would disclose that?
No, not at this exact moment. Meaning, even though I think it's this kind of slow walk to disclosure, I don't think they would come out and say, hey, I think it's too paradigm breaking. If people immediately saw the video of a craft going Mach 5 and then making a right turn, what would people say? Some people would say, oh, that's not real, that's fake. But the moment that you define that video as real, their paradigm breaks immediately.
So then let's just walk through this.
Yeah. What does that mean?
What would they do instead? If they didn't disclose it, what actions would they take?
I think they would do this. Because you're not going to have a politician, meaning Rubio has never come around and said, they're aliens. Would never do it.
Sure?
Romney wouldn't even do
it.
Not by itself, no.
Not by themselves, no.
No. And so what you would do is you would get like they typically do. They would say, all right, we don't want to come out and say we're for reparations, so we're going to have a report. We're going to have somebody come up. A committee of 6.
Yes.
The committee of 6 is going to come back with a report and explain. That way you can diffuse responsibility.
You create a vehicle, you make it more official, you put it off your own back.
Well, this guy in this report came out with this. I think it's that. And so it's like, all right, we're going to have a report. all right, we're going to formalize the X-Files division,
but that's what
and
they're
we need
doing.
another report.
That's exactly what they're doing.
Yeah.
But then aren't you just saying that you think right now there are aliens? Basically, in other words, based on seeing what they're doing,
yes,
they're setting it up to just be able to selectively release more and more.
I mean, like when Romney comes out and they say Jake Tapper is like, dude, you have to explain this because, like I said, you have to explain that. Like people should be screaming at the government. I'm going to be
as pessimistic as you often are when it comes to political stuff. Why, Jamarl? Why do they need to explain it to the public? What's in it for them?
It's not about what's in it for them. It's about what is the responsibility of Congress and the government to the public, and is it the responsibility of the public or the government to disclose?
But don't they have a response? Like you talk about their responsibility, healthcare, all these other parts of our economy, all these other foundational parts, a responsibility that they are not upholding. In other words,
yes,
you see evidence of them not doing that kind of thing. Yes. Why do you think they do that with aliens? Why wouldn't they just keep it back?
What do you mean? Why would they keep it a secret?
Why wouldn't they just keep it a secret? You know, do whatever R&D they can on the tech. Leverage their relationship with whatever entities we're presuming.
No, that's the question.
Yeah.
That is literally the question. Like,
why wouldn't they do that?
Meaning, why are they disclosing at all? Meaning, if you've said for 70 years, this is swamp gas, you've hired scientists to come out and say this is bunk. You've done all of that for 70 years, and all of a sudden, why now? Why government doesn't change policy unless there's a reason for government to change policy? And so my biggest thing is, who does Elizondo work for? And this is me liking the guy. I like the guy. I want the guy to come back on. Yeah. But the ramifications of this are so big that you're stuck with this thing of, okay, I need to know this stuff. This stuff, it burns in me. It's like, why does he need a security clearance now if he's not working in security? Okay, well, so he is working in security. Okay, what is the capacity that he's working in? Does that capacity have anything to do with getting this information out and disclosing? Meaning, is there a thought behind this that is pushing this out and for unknown reasons? And if that's the case, it's like we're useful idiots working in, for these aims. Look, I don't know. I would say the question is what you're posing, basically. Why should they disclose? Well, it's not about why should they disclose. It's that they're doing some kind of confirmation, disclosure, whatever you want to call it. And the question becomes, why now? That's my question.
Yeah.
And when I asked Elizondo, I think he said, well, I mean, isn't it about time? It's like, yeah, dude, that's not an answer. That's not an answer. It's cute, but not an answer.
Yeah, because you could say that at any time.
Yeah.
That's not actually answering the question.
Right. But if you're asking, should government have a philosophical right to disclose? Yeah, I think the public on some level should know.
No, I know, but I'm not talking philosophy, and you got where I was going. I was going to practically, like, what would make, why would they be doing this? What would there be?
That's the catch. I don't know the why.
Yeah.
I don't understand the why. And yeah, that also makes me answer.
That's up in the air. Hopefully what happens is they do disclose the technology is groundbreaking and we can use it in our society to solve a lot of problems and feed people and house people.
Is that how that get used?
Transport people.
Is that how that get used?
I don't know what the tech is, but that's the assumption.
But that's not my assumption. My assumption is that stuff get used in a sense of national security. Because I think politicians are politicians.
Maybe.
And I think they're politicians even in that context.
I don't even think that. I don't even buy that. Because put it like this. Say they use the most advanced ballistic tech and rocketry tech or laser tech, whatever they discover, and they just set aside all the rest of the stuff. They throw out the baby and focus on the bathwater when it comes to the technology they're able to, learn from when it comes to this. Wouldn't it be better for them to put to use all the other tech to make their economy stronger so they can outcompete the other nations? Wouldn't they be better served as leaders of nations by integrating that stuff because they'd get a competitive edge? Their nations would get a competitive edge, that kind of thing. I can look at it from a cynical, more
I agree
viewing them as self-interested demons.
Yeah.
To quote Immanuel Kant, or that kind of thing, instead of, loving, benevolent people, and they would still probably do it. Why haven't they yet? That's a big curiosity.
Well, that's the catch, right? Meaning, what does the technology do? Does the technology disrupt your current paradigm?
Yeah.
And if it does, what does it mean for oil and gas to be bunk?
Or what does it mean
for, you know what I mean? Like,
what
does it mean?
The oil and gas industry is lobbying against.
Yeah, right. I know, right? It's like, keep the technology out. Keep that technology out.
True villainous.
I guess that's kind of my point, though. Like, if you think of it and say, okay, wow, this technology basically destroys our current world paradigm, either in oil and gas, solar power, I have no idea.
I don't buy that. I
don't know.
I guess I'm saying be that evil.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, look, for whatever reason, they kept that stuff in the black.
Yeah.
That's all I know.
Yeah.
And I know they're saying, okay, now this is real. And like you said, it could be, we don't know how it works. Meaning it could literally be, if you drop a nuclear sub back in 1540, you give them all the resources in the world, would they ever figure out what it is? They'd be like, all right, this is a Dore. We have this door, and we can hit people over the head with this door. We found this new technology. It's that, right?
It's the best battering ram ever.
Right.
It's an underwater battering ram.
Right.
Whoever thought?
So it could be that.
Yeah.
So, but again, we're in the black. That's my point. Like, it's how much does the government know? And it's like right now, it could be, well, the government may know what's in it. Maybe the government doesn't know what's in it. Maybe the government know how the craft work. Maybe the government doesn't know how the craft work. Maybe the government. It's that.
Now, here's the thing, Jamarl. They want us to think that we're in the black because they're in the red because they don't have enough money. And that was just a cute pun, but it's true. They want us to think that we don't know enough because we're not, the federal government isn't giving itself enough funds to do research on this stuff. Do you think that's accurate or do you think that's just a money grab?
Again, I don't know. I mean, because the federal government has no issue allocating money to military resources.
Yeah.
And so, I don't think there's an issue with that. I think the point of the report was to formalize it. I think that's just a quirk. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like the report wasn't there just to get money. The report was there more so for the thing of this is a real issue. All of us, meaning all of the alphabet soup, sign up and say, yeah, we back up this report.
Yes.
And then the report says amazing things. I think that was the point of the report.
That is the thing, is it seemed to want more confirmation and legitimacy than it did direct funding.
And it even goes into attacking this, like the giggle factor, saying, look, this is hurting our ability to get information. This is a real thing, et cetera, et cetera. And at the point where media starts saying this is real, and then the politics says this is real, that is a huge, huge megaphone in your space, in your world space.
Yes.
And so it's like, at some point, money is going to go to it. Money is going to be formalized, and they've already formalized the program. And so at this point, it's like, this is a real thing in the way that your government and media is responding to it. And yet it's not a real thing. It's it's real strange in regards to the quality of realness. Yes, they're going to function as if it's real. No, the public hasn't internalized what it means. And that's the part that gets heady. And maybe that's where you're like, dude, you're jumping ahead in regard to the questions that you're asking. But the ramifications of this are profound. And they're leaving us in the dark in a radical way. And because they've left us in the dark in a radical way, we have questions. And so it's like the rational question is, how much do they know? When did they know it?
Yeah.
Do they really know what's in the craft? Or are they just saying that it's a national security risk? If they know that it's not us, why are they saying that it's, that it's up in the air? Like Mark Romney is like, it's not China, it's not Russia, it's not us. Not saying it's aliens. It's like, dude, you wipe everything
Not
off
saying
the
it's
table.
aliens, but I'm not saying I'm not saying it's aliens.
Right, it's so bizarre.
Yeah.
Like, because I think Romney is every man at this moment. And I think it's, okay, this is so big that I get that you're telling me it's real, but I need more. Like, before you break my reality space, I need more than just you telling me that. I think it's that. And, I don't know what it means to break our thoughts of the world. I mean, what does it mean when it's humanity is no longer the center of the universe, and that this reality space is not just the stage by which man plays off his drama and everything else? And it's like, whoa, wait, there's other dramas? What do you mean there's other dramas?
I think that we'd actually get over that part quite a bit easier. I think it's a lot of the specific changes. Because I'll put it like this. I think
it's what it means in practice.
Yeah, what it means in practice. Like, how are we going to adapt to all this? What are the specific changes? What do they want us to do with our climate? What do they want us to do with A, B, Z, X, Y, Z?
Oh, I mean, I don't even think it's an engagement with anything else. I'm talking about internally with us in regards to how does humanity confront that from the standpoint of government, from the standpoint of science,
all the specific changes.
Yeah, specific changes. I think that's where it gets sticky. I think that's where we hit our head on.
Yeah, because here's the thing with the other side of it, the more cultural or like metaphorical or metaphysical aspects of this. What does it mean exactly? What is my role in the universe? What can I look to try to make sense of this? That kind of thing where we've had to struggle for this before, and suddenly we have a context. We find other intelligent life.
Yeah.
We have an A/B test to see how somebody else did it. That kind of thing.
Yeah.
I think we'll actually, get used to and accommodate that stuff pretty quickly. And the reason I'm saying that is, if I talk to people, they seem like they can get it into their heads and kind of get used to it fairly quickly. And then what they start wondering about is, okay, what are all the specific? What does that look like? You know, specifically, what is that society? What do those changes look like? People, I think, are fairly open on the first.
I think I think the first part is not like I said. The first year, I think, is great.
Yeah.
I think it's what does it mechanically mean?
Yeah.
And I think that's where it gets sticky, because I don't think the people in the country are going to be okay with this. Body over top of the country that is dictating on some level, or at the very least commanding. And then it becomes, what are the laws that make that work? What are the laws like? How do we relate to one another? If there's tech that all of a sudden creates this kind of high-speed thing, what does it mean to work in China but live in, New York?
Yeah, and
like the world gets very weird all of a sudden.
The comparison that we would draw, like the only recent event, big event, global event in human memory is like the colonization of the New World.
Yeah.
Which, of course, didn't work out.
Right.
Colonized.
But honestly,
it doesn't seem like it's that, though. It doesn't seem like we're being rapidly colonized.
It's that part. Any group that is in our interests would never contact us like that.
Hopefully.
I mean, because it would, think about what it would do. It's so radical.
Unless they themselves are the bright-eyed, bushy-tailed neocons. We're just like, gosh, we can make these guys so much better.
Right.
But no, this is where we get into the trap of I'm talking about the motivation of some unknown entity as if I can make sense of it.
And it's like, that's where you can get to, okay, what does the government know?
Yeah.
Like, all of this really does boil down to, what does the government know? You can't put out a report like this. And then the report is like, hey, we don't know anything. That's what the report is like. There's a bear there, but we don't know anything. Don't ask us anything. We need more research. And it's like, no, man, that shouldn't be acceptable.
Yeah, you take them at their word. That's actually not that impressive, guys. Yeah. Come on, you've been at this for a long time. Yes. You've had high-tech tech.
And you have a classified addendum that is 90 pages or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
It's like 80 pages. The report that we got was 9 pages. Oh, okay, yeah.
Let's
take a call.
Do this.
Let's take a call.
Let's go into. I want to go into a break. We've been at this for about half an hour. I want to take your calls when we come back. 202-521-1320 is the phone number. Again, that's 202-521-1320. Be right back.
Fault lines.
In a media landscape filled with so-called journalists acting as stenographers for their billionaire bosses, there is a desperate need for news, analysis, and perspectives that buck the status quo and get to the heart of how domestic and international events impact you and me, as well as showing how we can get involved in the struggle to change that status quo. Check out By Any Means Necessary on Radio Sputnik, Monday through Friday from 2 to 4 p.m. Eastern, to hear the stories and voices that mainstream media refuses to tell you. And join us as we connect the political, social, and economic movements shaping the world around us. That's By Any Means Necessary, Monday through Friday at 2 to 4 p.m. Eastern, right here on Radio Sputnik.
Fault lines.
And we're back. You're listening to Fault Lines with Thomas and Stranahan. 202-521-1320 is the phone number. Again, that's 202-521-1320. It is open. I mean, it's early for calls.
Yeah.
And so, if you're around, call in. We have more time to have a sort of open conversation. Usually we do not have these kinds of usually when we take calls, it's like in one segment and we get like 5, 6, 4, however many people calling. We have to kind of go through them. If somebody wants to call in,
have at it.
Feel free. Have at it. 202-521-1320. And I can see that we have a caller. We have Calvin calling in from North Carolina. Calvin, you're on. What's going on?
Hi, good morning. I was just thinking about what you were saying. I was thinking plausible explanations, but I think two possible reasons might be for the government trying to have this so-called coming out of the dark party, or either, more propaganda as usual, but wanted to manipulate people. It might be because the internet has made it more harder to conceal, and it's made people more aware about this so-called phenomenon. And I think the other thing is that a lot of the old heads or people, who are around on the ground level, who saw all this stuff actual and everything 70 years ago, a lot of those people are dead or dying off. And the second generation of those people, same thing about them. But, that old saying, they say dead men, they tell no tales. So the government doesn't have to contend with those people or deal with these respected people like Donald Kehoe, Stanton Friedman, Philip Corso, and, J. Allen Hynek.
Yeah.
These people, the government can now craft whatever narrative they want, and these people aren't around to blow the government up and make them look stupid.
Well, to be fair, Hynek tried to during his lifetime. Hynek was the one who was doing Project Blue Book, and he originally found, okay, the government is trying to call all this swamp gas. The government is not interested in a real investigation. It's trying to kill the issue. And he came out and did his own investigation after the fact on many of the things that were in the program himself. So, yeah, and Friedman is what? He's an icon. Friedman was a hardcore scientist. Friedman, called Bob Lazar, say he was full of it, all this other stuff. Did this really hardcore investigation into Roswell. There was this kind of scientific, rigorous investigation. So he was this kind of scientist thing. So he was that kind. But yeah, he's passed. Both of these guys have passed. But maybe you're right. I mean, if you think of aviation, like these guys are going to space now, or all of the billionaires are in space. And if all of these companies are in space, can the government have control over what is seen in that context if these things aren't like NASA or government programs? And so maybe, but again, we're in the dark. I mean, the very fact that we're asking the question means we're basically in the dark on motivation and even what they know. It's unfortunate.
Well, two points on this, Calvin. Assuming you're still there, I'm curious to hear your take. 2 points on it. One, the internet doesn't just make it easier to find this information and to share it. It also makes it easier to fabricate it and to spread it as if it were real and to do psyops in order to control communities, those kinds of things. Like there's a cat and mouse game in the same sense that there is in the world of encryption and cybersecurity, encryption, decryption. At the same time that this is a potent tool for sharing factual information, it's also a potent tool for sharing fabricated information. And, devious actors at play will try to mix the two because they want to, throw a spanner in the works or screw things up or whatever for the community theoretically. I'm not trying to be I'm just throwing that in there as a devil's advocate kind of thing. It goes both ways.
Because they're fakers,
and it's the
that
same.
Make a habit out of faking.
And it's the same thing with the generational argument you made. The idea that we had a generation die off. You guys clearly know more about this than I do. You're naming specific names, but I could see it, and it sounded like the case you were making, Calvin, was there was a generation of people who knew facts. Dead men tell no tales. Now that generation has died off, the government can tell whatever tales it wants to, and those people aren't going to intervene. And that's. It sounded like the case you were making. I can make a very similar but sort of opposite case, which is the generation of people that wanted to keep these disclosures from coming out for whatever self-serving notions has died off. And now you have this new generation of people that's come in. They see, whoa, they've opened up the books. What is this? What are they, they've started to look into the archives. What are we finding here? And they're like, the world needs to know about this. How do we get this out? I can make that case too. I just don't know which way it goes.
Exactly.
But the bringing up the generational argument, I think, is valid, Calvin. That's a good point, because that's often how this stuff works. It's how it works in science. You have certain people who take a tenor when they look at things in certain ways. They die off, they get replaced. This is the narrative. And then fields change magically overnight, sadly, as graveyards get filled up. The same thing could be happening in this case, too. You know what I mean, Jamarl? You get where I'm coming from.
No, I agree with you. Look, it's very possible. It's very possible. It could be people dying off or something environmentally has changed. I have no idea.
Yeah.
And again, that's kind of the problem. Transparency.
Any take there, Calvin? Assuming you were still with us?
No. Well, my thing is that the internet is a great tool, but like any tool, it can be used for truth or it can be used for dissemination of more propaganda about, stuff that's not any value at all. So, like I said, the government, they can craft whatever narrative they want to, but on top of that, they can take a whole new group of people and show them this technology and say, hey, this is stuff that we have.
Yeah.
Calvin, thank you, man. We have two more callers. Calvin from North Carolina, thank you. All right, let's go to Michael from Sydney. Michael, we have about a minute. What's up?
Yeah. Look, I'll keep it short, guys. But on one of my trips to hospital, when I was in my last year of my university, in my undergrad, I came up with an economic formula, which is also a form of mathematics in calculus. And on my last trip to hospital, I had a doctor from England, a very posh doctor from England, and all he did was quiz me about physics and my ideas on physics. And I said to my ex-partner, to my mother's daughter, I said, I'm getting out tomorrow. She said, yeah, I know. You answered all the questions correctly because they asked you a whole lot of formulas. They followed me around for about 4 weeks, just asking me physics questions. And all I will say is Einstein said time is relative to the observer. So if time is relative to the observer, so is space and matter. So basically, and the doctor's name actually from England was Dr. Cameron Armstrong, ironically enough. So all I will say is basically we are observing things that break the rules of physics, and it's been an argument of mine for a long time that their science is basically, everyone says science is a science. Well, we thought physics was a science, and now we're seeing things that physics can't explain. So what is a science? Is a science fixed, or is it just explaining what we can observe in the moment, in the time? And
it seems like it's a fixed formal explanation for what we can perceive at the moment and at the time, and then you'll often get new instruments or tools that let you see things that you couldn't see before. So, for instance, germ theory only started to make sense once you had more advanced microscopes. Once you had people able to see germs, they started to, what are these things? How do they work? work, and then they started to get into it. It took those kinds of discoveries, but it changes. And the whole point about these disclosures is they could change our physics. We didn't touch on that in our conversation this morning.
But it
could dramatically change our physics, which is, I think, why some physicists are reticent to talk about it, because they don't know exactly what that looks like. But hey, we're going to be coming back in a minute. You're listening to Fault Lines with Thomas and Stranahan. Be right back.
Listening to Radio Sputnik. Telling the untold.
Fault Lines.
Live from the divided states of America, precipitously perched at the edge of this resilient and exploited globe. Welcome to your context lens for the American perspective. In the left corner, I'm your ever-vigilant, your indefatigable political analyst, Jamarl Thomas.
And in the independent corner, I am your political analyst, Shane Stranahan.
That means, all things being equal, you are listening to Fault Lines with Thomas and Stranahan. All right, good first segment. I enjoyed that first segment. It was weird because it was basically about UFOs, but it's about UFOs in regards to the context of the report.
That's part of why you enjoyed it, Jamarl.
Yeah, well, it was that, but it just the larger questions on it.
Yeah.
That's all.
No,
And,
I feel like it flowed pretty well.
yeah, no, I think it went well, and I think we talk about this in a way that I don't think media ever gets to. Like, I don't think they've jumped to, okay, what does it mean?
No.
They've just said, oh, this thing's in the sky.
And I don't even think that UFO, I don't know, you hit my attention, but I don't know that the UFO community talks about it in quite these ways as well. It seems like, I don't know.
Somewhat. I mean, it's
Some of
weird.
it, maybe.
They like me coming on their panels, and I assume it's because I talk about it in these terms. Like, I'm not a formal UFO person. I'm a political person, right?
Yeah.
I do politics, history, philosophy, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's like with this issue, it's like, yes, I'm enamored by it. Yes, I cover it, but this is a subset of the larger stuff. And so it's like when I talk about it from that lens. And maybe that lens is a little bit different. Like, you know, oh, there's a leak. It's like, okay, that guy's being managed. It's like, what do you mean? That guy's just leaked. It's like, it's the way it's partially cynical, but partially not, because I don't know the intent, meaning those things can take place even in a good context. And so, I don't know. I try to, I don't know what the floor is. And so I try to explain it in those terms.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's like, if you don't know what it is, you can't say you know what it is. And so you go from this perspective of, okay, it could be X, and you try to follow it logically through it, maybe. But I think we did cover it well. And I think you being adds a great dimension to that. Because for you, it's like, okay, I'm not formally in this. So this is how I see it. And it's going to be different off kilter. And it gives a different perspective on how this stuff is covered. No, I think we cover it extremely well. And this is a pat on our backs. But yes, I think it's sort of. Let's go to headlines. In the news, about 5,371 new COVID cases were reported in the United States yesterday, although this weekend was the 4th, and there were 41 new deaths. Over the past week, there's been an average of about 11,797 cases per day, an increase of 5% from the average 2 weeks earlier. 47% of the total American public has been fully vaccinated, and 55% of residents have received at least one dose. As of this morning, the coronavirus has infected 33,690,446 people across the United States and has killed an unfortunate, at least we think so, 604,793 Americans. The UK's new health secretary, Sajid Javad, has warned of a possible 100,000 new cases per day in Britain that may be coming this summer. This comes as Boris Johnson has confirmed that most mandates will be undone. The rest of the Florida condo building was demolished this Sunday as local authorities still struggle to unearth the remaining victims of the condo collapse. This comes as Hurricane Lisa bears down on the region. The Taliban has continued to capture territory in Afghanistan, seizing more than 10 districts in 24 hours. The troops are advancing rapidly as NATO forces withdraw. The world oil prices have reached the highest level since 2014. This follows a failure between the members of OPEC to come to an agreement to increase output of oil despite surging demands. prices have risen to nearly $77 a barrel. The former challenger for the Belarusian presidency, Viktor Babayarka, has been sentenced to 14 years in prison. Authorities in Nigeria's Kaduna state have ordered all schools to close following a mass abduction of over 100 children this weekend. Those are your headlines. You're listening to Fault Lines with Thomas and Stranahan. There's one story I want to get to also that we talked about or touched on in the last segment. U.S. left Afghanistan airfield at night and did not tell the new commander. This is Washington Post. The United States left Afghanistan's Bagram Air Base after nearly 20 years by shutting off the electricity and slipping away in the night without notifying the base's new Afghan commander, who discovered the Americans' departure more than 2 hours after they left, Afghan military officials said. Afghanistan's army showed off the sprawling air base Monday, providing a rare first glimpse of what had been the epicenter of America's war to unseat Taliban and hunt down al-Qaeda perpetrators of 9/11 on America. That is so wild. They just left with a whisper. And apparently the base was, like we said, sacked or raided. This is so wild to me. It's such this kind of dominant, what is it, face of American power in Afghanistan. And it's like to leave with a whisper after all of the yelling and screaming that took place prior. It's just very weird. It's very heady. It's almost in a kind of a way how we're leaving. I mean, it's not we're leaving the stable government in place and we're leaving and we have this relationship with the stable government that the people love. And it's not that. It's not that. It's the opposite. We're just leaving. We're just trying to get out there by a very specific date. But the Taliban saying, if NATO is here on 9/11, when America leaves, that's your butt buddy, basically, saying we're going to consider you occupying force and you will be attacked just like everybody else. So, yeah, Taliban is going to take Afghanistan, and the catch becomes, what is Afghanistan under Taliban control? Because that's basically what we will be talking about, all things being, meaning if life perpetuates itself, that's what's going to happen.
Well, one thing worth remembering, I think, is that however bad Taliban control is probably going to be, it's almost certainly going to be better than the chaos between now and when the Taliban takes over, which, to be clear, does not mean that the Taliban are good or should be in control or I'm, morally judging them as better, whatever. You get my point.
Power
the point
has nothing to do with good, bad, right, wrong, kind of stuff.
The power they impose and the order they impose will probably be better, probably be more comfortable than the violent chaos that the country is going to sort of slowly reel into as various lowly militias strive to take control and et cetera. You get the picture.
Yes.
That's the point. And of course, critically, that comes back to us.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, we invade it, you break it, you break it, you buy it. Another story I want to go to, Andre, can we bring up the Joe Biden clip for the moment? Joe Biden, so Sha'Carri Richardson, this is the track star. This is the one who, I think she was the 100-meter sprinter. And as a 100-meter sprinter, she was found with marijuana in her system. Now, this breaks the rules. She was suspended for 30 days. And in addition to being suspended for 30 days, she is not going to be able to race in Tokyo. Now, you can imagine for a track star, that's brutal. That's so brutal. And she was tweeting saying, look, I just thank you all for backing me. I'm sorry I can't be a star this year, but I will be a star in the other world event. So Joe Biden gets asked about this. I hate this reply so much, and I'm going to explain why I hate this reply. Yes, I'm going to be brutal. Let's play this clip. He's asked about Sha'Carri Richardson and whether or not it's fair to keep her out, because I don't know about you, but I'm unaware of pot being a performance-enhancing drug. I don't know anybody who takes a bong and is like, I'm going to run as fast as humanly possible.
That was actually what made Lance Armstrong successful.
Really?
It's not the steroids. It's the bong hits.
The bong hits.
You don't see the Tour de France. He would take these breaks, and every time he'd come back, and his eyes would just be, you know what they look like.
They would just beat red as he's riding his bike at fantastic speeds.
Exactly.
I didn't know that pot increased lung capacity like that. But apparently the Olympics committee knows. So let's play Joe Biden's response.
Look, it's the rules are the rules, and everybody knows that the rules we're going in. Whether they should remain that should remain the rules, a different issue. But the rules are the rules, and I was really proud of it.
Rules are the rules. Rules are the rules. And she responded to this, right? She was like, well, those people who are saying rules are the rules and people can't even wear their masks, like health checks and everything else. And I was like, I would do you one better. People are saying rules are the rules and have a son that is a crackhead, which breaks the law. That breaks the law. If the rules are the rules, then your son would be in a cage right now. I mean, whether we're talking about this thing for the laptop with the gun and you filling out the application in order to get the gun and not putting on that there was a, crackhead problem, or the crack in and of itself, which breaks the law. There's no state that has legalized crack. And so if crack is against the law and your son is indeed a crackhead and rules are indeed the rules, then your son will be sitting in a jail cage right now. Right now. So let's be less cavalier about rules are the rules. And I mean, because I would imagine this is a painful thing. It's like she says, I did pot to help with my mom or something like that. I don't care why you did it. I don't care. You could have just been having a great night out. It's like, yes, let's just do it up. I don't care. You shouldn't have been held off for something that was not a performance-enhancing drug. What about coffee? I'm more concerned about coffee. Is coffee a performance-enhancing drug? What about alcohol? Does alcohol get the same standard? Why pot? Why are you so enamored with pot? Why are you attacking pot in this way and putting people in a cage for this nonsense? And beyond putting people in a cage for this nonsense, blocking who would most likely be an Olympic star. Yeah, that is horrible. And be president, it's like, oh, the rules are the rules. And to have a son where you know his sins. You know his sins. Rules are the rules, Shane.
Yeah, that's the part of it that really bugs.
Rules
and
are the rules.
That's the part of it that if people were making a point of saying exactly what you were saying, Biden wouldn't be doing nearly as well. And he's not even doing all that well.
Yeah.
But that's exactly the point, is his son. You hit it. I don't need to double down on that.
Oh, the crackhead thing?
Incidentally,
Crackhead son?
exactly.
Rules are the rules, Joe Biden.
Hunter Biden, the fact that his son is living free with his help and his security, Secret Service agents apparently being posted to help Hunter Biden repeatedly.
And by the way, making $80,000 a month doing crack in the States, not in the Ukraine. He wasn't doing crack in the Ukraine.
Yeah.
He was doing crack here in the States for a lot of that.
Yeah.
I'm using the term crackhead a lot. Ask my wife, how many times can I say crackhead son and be a good person? She was like, I don't know, man. I'll give you 10 for 10 minutes. And she heard the other video. She was like, yeah, man, you're more bad. Because I'm annoyed by that.
No,
Joe Biden was in Congress.
Keep slathering it on.
Putting people in prison for longer with using crack as opposed to cocaine.
Yeah.
And he said, I don't care your upbringing. I don't care the environment that created the person that is here. We have to do something about this now.
Rules are the rules.
Rules are the rules.
Incidentally, I want to
crackhead sign.
Caffeine was actually apparently banned from the Olympics from like 1984 to 2004.
Was it?
Yeah.
Oh, they got
and
rid
then
of
within the last couple decades, they let it back in. So they're serious about the performance-enhancing drug stuff, but caffeine seems like a more performance-enhancing drug than marijuana.
Yeah.
Marijuana, cannabis, pot, weed, whatever you want to call it, reefer. Reefer, less performance. And it might be like a painkiller technically. And you can see Sha'Carri Richardson, muscly, she, attractive, athletic woman. She pushes herself. You might think she goes home. She wants to recline slightly, whatever.
Yeah.
Smoke weed. I don't care. That's the thing. That's the thing. It seems like far less of a performance-enhancing drug than caffeine, which is legal.
Yeah.
In the Olympics, to be clear, and of course, generally.
Yeah, even for chess, there was this question of, okay, what about caffeine? Is it a performance, that type of stuff?
Yeah.
I don't know, man. It's the fact that it seems arbitrary because it's not a performance-enhancing drug. Like, you have to explain to me, basically, how is this helping her do her racing? And if you can't, then it just seems arbitrary.
Yeah.
And so Joe Biden saying rules are rules, he could have said, hey, it just seems arbitrary. I don't see how.
If it's a strong enough sativa, I could see it maybe being performance enhancing.
Oh, like it just kind of has you like just on the cloud nine and stuff like that.
Exactly. Cloud nine, super
people
awake.
Drink beer in the morning sometimes to get a zen effect.
Yeah.
And you know what I'm talking about? Like when alcohol in small quantities or pot in small quantities or something in small quantities gives the person a creative edge as they go about. I can see that, but nobody cares about that. Nobody really ever brings that part up.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about? Like it puts it's like as long as it's a small amount, it puts them in a certain headspace. And the headspace is that what people try to get. But that's a whole different thing. Nobody cares about that. We're talking about pot in the context of her running as fast as humanly possible for 100 meters. And I don't believe, like I said, that people take a bong hit or a reefer hit or, take capsules or whatever.
Yes.
I don't think they do that and just say, I am now going to run at the speed of light and go out and do it. I just don't buy it. I don't buy it. And so, yeah, it comes across as arbitrary. It comes across as, oh, this was against the law, and because this was against the law, we're going to make this against the blah, blah, blah. It comes across as that, and that seems bogus to me. And I wish Joe Biden would have basically just said that.
Wait, hang on a second. Here's the thing. I wasn't paying as much attention at the Olympics, but Engineer Andre just brought up a very good point, which is, wait, Michael Phelps, the swimmer.
Yeah.
There was a big thing about him testing positive.
Yes,
this is what everybody's talking about with the story, of course.
Yes, he did.
Let's bring it back to mind. Michael Phelps tested positive for weed.
Yes, he did. Yes,
and then didn't he go on to compete in the Olympics?
I thought he did. I don't remember everything around the story, but I don't know if was it positive during an event that's coming up. Like, I don't know the details of the story.
That's the thing. I want to get back into.
Yeah, but he did test positive. Yes, that was a big issue.
He attended the Olympics, and if I remember, he did swimmingly, so to speak.
He was astonishingly good.
Yes.
Like, he was like a superhuman in regards to how good he was at the swimming thing.
Yes.
So, yeah, but I don't know the details. I don't know the details. But, yeah, that was one of the cases that came up with Michael Phelps. It was aggravating. It's aggravating to hear Joe Biden do that. That's all.
Yeah.
It's like, you're supposed to represent America, Joe Biden, and representing America is to complain, to moan, and to throw your table over. This is an outrage. Like, I'm the president of America. Like, and that's what you need to do. That's what I want to see. But he doesn't have it in him. And, I mean, that's, it's a political posturing thing. It's like, wow, Joe Biden really loves America. It's really.
Well, yeah, and because if his son didn't have those problems, I think it would actually come off a lot better. But
yes,
once you notice that his son is,
it makes it radically hypocritical.
It turns it completely.
Yes.
Because on the one hand, he's the president. What do you expect him to be like? The Olympics must come down. You don't expect him to be that hard on it because it's weed, which is technically also a federally illegal drug. It's still scheduled.
Well,
in the States.
Right there. That's the other part.
That's what makes it a little bit weird.
Joe Biden was supposed to overturn the scheduling on weed.
Yes.
And he told people multiple times, he has a video saying, I, Joe Biden, will change the scheduling of weed. I'm your president, Joe Biden. He has a video just saying that. And yet, how many days are we into the presidency and nothing has been done? Meaning, people are still being put in a cage for smoking a plant that is half of the country is legal.
Yes.
Half of the country is legal. So on one line, a cop grabs me. Like, whoa, why are you touching me? I have an ID. That's for the other state, son, and you've just crossed state lines, and we're taking you to jail. You're breaking the law. Like, and I know that's hyperbolic, but you get my point.
Sure, it happens.
Yeah. And one state is illegal, the other state is legal, and you have this kind of weird mix within the context of your country. You, Joe Biden, said you were going to remove the scheduling link and expunge the records of the people who got caught in that nonsense drug war, who Nixon, or the guy working for Nixon, admitted was to lock up blacks and hippies for political reasons. You all knew that. You knew that interview existed, and yet you still allowed the same drug policy. Obama walking through the jails, talking to people and shaking heads. It's like, Obama went into the jails. Yeah. But what about those people who were locked up for pot when he himself was a stoner? And so it's like these guys.
I don't know if Obama was a stoner.
He was.
Was he a stoner?
Seriously.
Or did he just smoke once or twice?
No. Go back and listen. He admits this freely.
Yeah.
He used to be a stoner. He would say, yeah, I used to smoke a lot of weed. Yeah, that was his thing. And it's like you get a president that's black and a hippie, and he still doesn't do anything, despite the fact that he was the exact person that Nixon was looking to lock up.
Yeah.
Okay, serenity now. I'm sorry. But look, I look at this issue, and I think you were supposed to do something on this issue. You haven't done something on this issue. That's another promise broken. That's a flick of a pen, as Tom Perez would say, that you didn't do. Another failure. And so now saying when this woman gets busted for weed, of all things, as if it's a performance-enhancing drug, and you, the president of the United States, who has a son that's a crackhead, and at the exact same time, have this, you have a son that...
And she's black. I don't...
There's...
It's worth bringing up. Michael Phelps is white.
Yep.
She's black. Weed has been used systematically.
Right.
Look at who's been arrested.
And again, my point is he's supposed to have done something about that anyway. So it brings that back to the issue.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I'm just saying we hadn't thrown that into it. And I think we do. I think we try and probably often do a good job of like talking about racial issues, not just from a racial perspective, but from other perspectives.
Yeah.
I get it. And she is just a person, but like we hadn't brought that into the conversation. I think it's worth bringing in.
Yeah.
She's black.
Right.
She's being prevented from doing this stuff. As far as I remember, Michael Phelps tested positive.
Yeah.
He was able to get through. He's white. He, world renowned as a swimmer.
Well, I guess I'm saying, when did he test positive?
I get it. 3-month suspension. That's what Andre's saying.
Okay.
I guess, and part of what's troublesome here is that this is just the timing is so bad because the Olympics is about to start, of course. Anyway, we need to go into a break. You're listening to Fault Lines with Thomas and Stranahan. We'll be right back.
lines. Want to talk? Get in touch with us at radio@sputniknews.com.
What's the most important hour of the day? It's the Critical Hour with Dr. Wilmer Leon. On this show, we don't just deliver the latest headlines. We divide the real from the fake. Tune in to hear from some of the most brilliant political minds of today. Get in-depth news and analysis that goes beyond the surface and dig straight into the details. Set your clock to the Critical Hour for a news perspective unlike any of those other guys. Tune in to the Critical Hour with Dr. Wilmer Leon, weekdays 6 to 7 p.m. Eastern, and catch us on Facebook Live. You're listening to Radio Sputnik.
Fault Lines.
Welcome back to Fault Lines on Radio Sputnik. My name is Jamarl Thomas. I'm joined with my co-host Shane Stranahan and our producer, Cordell. Cordell, what's your last name?
Woodland.
Woodland, okay. Cordell Woodland. He is our producer. He is going to used to work in sports, actually, as a producer, and he is going to give us information on the Sha'Carri Richardson issue. I forgot that you were coming in to talk about this specific issue, so it's great. It dovetails
right
perfectly. So who is Sha'Carri Richardson? Let's start there.
A young track star, 21 years old, I believe, set the standard for this year in the trials for the 100-meter race.
Yeah.
Went out there, and I think she had the fourth best all-time record.
Oh, wow.
After the trials this year. Became an instant star by everybody. People kind of knew a little bit of her backstory, her tragedy of her losing her mother recently. So people kind of gravitated to her after that. But just her winning the race, the relays, and going up and into the stands to her family, she kind of like grasped people's heart from that point on. And
I mean, losing
was
a mom
thought to be a star.
Is intense.
Yeah,
I could imagine. And I could not imagine losing mine. And so her having to perform, her being in a public spotlight, and it's a vulnerability in a way that, you know, in some way allows people to connect to other people.
Right.
It's like, yeah, she's a track star. Yeah, she has all of those muscles. Yeah, she can run very fast. It's like, but she's a person. And that shines through when there's something of pain that people can connect to. So that's very cool. They're very interesting. Well, not very cool that she lost her mom, but you get my point. So from the standpoint of her skill, what were her chances in the Olympics? I mean, was it expected that she was going to win?
She was going in as the favorite for the gold. Definitely the favorite for the gold in the 100 meters.
Yeah.
Which she won't be able to run in anymore because, you know, her trial results have been thrown out due to her suspension.
And that's horrible.
For the Olympics,
so how long is the suspension?
Her trial, her suspension is for a month, and I believe it kicked in June 26th.
Okay.
So from June 26th until obviously July 26th, she'll be suspended. So that it takes her out of the 100-meter race, which is the race that she would start to really dominate in. Yeah. But it keeps her in contention for the 4x400 meter relays.
Oh, so she still may be able to run.
She may be able to run. It's up to the coach. The coach can elect, I believe, up to 4 other racers.
Interesting.
So she's holding out hope for that.
So, okay, so she has a chance of getting into the Olympics for that.
Right.
Now, I mean, look, what are the chances of the coach choosing her? I mean, if she's that good at the 100 meter, but oftentimes that's like, I remember, was it Michael Johnson? Where there were some people who could do like all of it.
Mm-hmm.
Like he used to be like just extreme in regards of an athlete of the capabilities. But I think he got busted for something too, if I'm not mistaken.
I believe so.
Yeah.
But off the top of my head, I can't remember, but I believe so.
Yeah, I bet he got busted in throughout the records. But either way, is it possible, had she have any previous experience in running in the additional relays?
Well, experience, I believe she has run the relays before.
Yeah.
And the question of can she be as dominant in the relays is really a different story because, you know, in the 100 meters is really just an individual thing. Relays, you kind of have, depending on your pole position and where you're coming in at, it's more team oriented.
Yeah.
So she may be required to have to play catch up for her team. They may have her. They typically, for these kind of races, they put the fastest person either at the beginning or the end. Yeah. You know, so
give them a good lead,
right?
Or we catch the person who's ahead.
Playing catch up, we need you to bring us back in it. So she could contribute, but it really determines to the rest of the team. And just for my personal thinking, I would think that the relay coach would ask her to join the team. I mean, she is obvious what her talents bring.
Yeah, considering the way people are talking about it.
Yeah, I mean, and if the option is there, I mean, this isn't something, at least in my opinion, and in popular opinion, is not something that is worth mentioning to the point to where you're just losing out on the Olympics totally.
Right.
You know, so she has the opportunity to get in there. I think that the coach would throw her a bone.
The marijuana thing, how do they justify that? I mean, are they making the argument that marijuana is a sports performance-enhancing drug?
Well, that's what they're trying to do. That's what the USDA is doing right now. They're saying that it's a performance-enhancing drug.
So stoners are our greatest athletes, basically.
Apparently. And I'm not going to sit here and act like a lot of the top athletes and a lot of
all of them smoke weed. All of them do. Especially like the surfers and the skateboarders, all this stuff.
It's like those players, they all smoke weed. I mean,
but that's not, they're not doing it. It's like, I'm going to up my game by just downing this ounce of weed and when smoking and sitting. It's the relax, just the chill and everything else. And I have a hard time believing that smokage of weed has increased their lung capacity to these Herculean.
If anything, you can make the argument that it hurts.
Yeah,
it hurts
I would think
your
it's that.
Stamina.
Yeah.
It would hurt with, you know, like you said, the lung capacity and things like it would slow you down to
create adverse conditions.
Yeah,
your ability to respond is like the ball is coming at you, like boom, just hit you in the face.
It would slow your reaction time down.
I'll give you an example. Our dog got hold of a piece of candy that had THC in it. And our dog got stoned. My wife was freaking out. Oh my God, the dog is something wrong with the dog. And we realized, okay, we think the dog is like, the dog was like, like it feels like pawing at the air. Or he's like flinching on
it's not.
Yeah, right. He didn't get, and that's kind of my point, right? These guys, I don't think that even if somebody makes the argument and says, no, man, really, it enhances their lung capacity by 0.3%, I still would say, what about their reaction time? What about their capability of doing? I don't buy that it's a performing-enhancing drug. It seems like that's an ideological choice on some level that these guys are putting in.
It is. And they have to grow up. At a certain point, you've already, you guys documented in the last segment, half the country is legal to smoke weed. Like, you've got to grow up at a certain point, and I think this is still.
So who's doing this? Is this the Olympic Committee, or is this something in the U.S., some kind of device in the U.S. that's keeping her up?
It's the U.S. committee. It is a U.S. committee-based situation. The Olympics has it's like a doping agency that they use to test their athletes and everything. So anything that's coming up on there that's basically not oxygen and water, you know, you're going to test positive. And they're going to count it against you the same level if it's weed to the point to where it's cocaine to where it is a performance.
They don't make a distinction at all.
There's no middle ground. There's no middle ground. And you guys brought up Michael Phelps earlier. Like his situation, he benefited off the fact of those pictures coming out after the 2008
That's what
Olympics.
I thought. Okay.
So he was able to compete, but the pictures came out in 2009. He got a 3-month suspension, so he had to miss the World Championship.
Okay.
So he was still able to compete at Olympics strictly off of timing of the video of the pictures being leaked.
It's not like they pull his medals.
Right,
Anything
of course not, like they did Marion Jones and everybody. You know.
No, and what they were saying was the problem is, and this is I want to get to that, but alcohol, you can, and I think they recently changed this, like 2018 or something like that. They made it so that it's not a disqualifying drug. You can drink it recreationally. You're not supposed to be wasted while you're performing, of course. It wouldn't be wise to in the first place, but people can do it and then go to the Olympics. A lot of people are talking about this in that context. But what other people are saying is, as they're defending this, they're bringing up like cycling and skiing. I saw people talking about that, where they're saying basically
they don't have that standard.
If you're high, in the same way that what they're worried about is like a cyclist in the Tour de France going 70 miles an hour. I'm almost quoting here.
Right.
Yeah.
And you're not supposed to handle machinery in the same way that like a snowboarder.
Yeah, but you can test the person there.
You could. That's the thing. Even that, it doesn't quite make sense to me. And even when they say that, they're saying, well, but the swimmers and the sprinters, they're not endangering anybody.
Right.
You can do that stuff while you're stoned.
That's right. And like I said, that has nothing to do with the person there.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, okay, 4 months ago, she smoked a blunt.
Right.
And now you're keeping her out. It's like, because we were concerned that she's going to be entirely stoned when she's on. But why do you think that?
Yeah.
Why do you think that? You can't test her there? Like, it's such a bizarre and unfair ruling.
You got to be really, really deep into the habit.
Yeah.
So, like, going on the stage in the Olympics, I'm like, all right, time to rip one.
Right. Totally
Smoking it
wasted.
literally right before you walk onto the track.
Exactly. I just don't see it.
Yeah, I don't see it either. I honestly don't see it. It just seems unfair. What did you think about Biden's response? And look, this is not a push. I'm just curious. This notion of, hey, man, rules are rules.
Yeah.
And it just seems like, yeah, dude, but that wasn't the case for your kid.
Yeah.
And you're just saying it for her like, hey, man, sorry, sucks for you.
Well, it's crazy. So it's a two-parter for me, at least. Like, I don't agree with the fact that rules are, well, to a degree I do, because rules are rules.
Yeah.
You know, but the rule sucks.
Yeah.
And everybody knows that the rule sucks.
Yeah.
Biden himself went on to say, does the rule need to be changed? That's a different discussion.
Yeah.
So he knows it. And to Sha'Carri's, I guess, detriment, in her interview that she did, she acknowledged, hey, I know what I did. I know I wasn't supposed to do it, and I know I did it anyway.
Yeah.
So she's even going to that extent of rules are rules a little bit by taking ownership, and I get that. I think the biggest thing is just that the rule needs to be changed. These people have to grow up.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just to that point. You can't. If we're going to allow people to get drunk the night before, who's to say they can't come hungover?
Yeah.
You know, and you smoke a blunt the night before, you're more liable to be able to be functional. I would say to run the race. So their argument is still trash.
It makes no sense.
And rules are rules until you start talking about changing the rules.
Yeah.
Right. And at that point, suddenly you're like, okay, all those people that we said the rules made them in trouble before. How do we deal with, like things get overturned, things change.
Expunging the record of people with time. Then that makes the point of, okay, those rules were wrong.
Yeah.
Those rules were wrong. And in this case, it's like we're looking at this with a clear eye saying, hey, this is wrong. This is wrong. And yeah, here we are. Look, Cordell, last name one more time. Woodland. I always keep forgetting that last name. But dude, thank you, man. I appreciate this. That's an awesome spot. This is our producer, Cordell. Fantastic job giving us a rundown on the Sha'Carri Richardson issue.
Thank you.
You guys are listening to Fault Lines with Thomas and Stranahan. We will be back in a moment.
Fault Lines. We are above all the latest developments, and we don't take any sides. Radio Sputnik, telling the untold.
Deshaun, what do you want to talk about today?
Well, Bob, that's easy. I want to talk about the need to stop the development of self-driving cars.
Again, Sean, you're driving me nuts. I think the self-driving car thing's already out of the gate.
No. It's never too late. See, now the leading experts in the field, just pick one, whichever one, leading experts have repeatedly warned us about the dangers of artificial intelligence. Look, I'm telling you, man, we have to stop the robots by any means necessary.
I see what you did there.
Yep.
Tune into our show By Any Means Necessary daily from 2 to 4 p.m. Eastern Time on Radio Sputnik. And don't forget to call in at 3:20 p.m. to our studio number 202-521-1320.
And if you miss us live, check us out on SputnikNews.com, Spreaker, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts to stay up to date on the latest political, social, and economic movements shaping the world around us.
Fault Lines.
And we're back. You're listening to Fault Lines with Thomas and Stranahan, and we are talking Afghanistan as the Taliban is surging and U.S. troops are both withdrawing and preparing for a larger and final withdrawal from Afghanistan coming up not too long away at this point, just a few months in early September. September 11th specifically is the date. And again, the Taliban taking over. The number here, they seized 10 districts in the span of less than 24 hours as NATO forces, including American forces, withdrew. We were also talking about the Bagram Air Force Base, which the last American troops apparently have left, and which was subsequently looted, again, not by the Taliban, just by, random anonymous looter types. But this is a sort of small picture of the general problem we're leaving behind and the problem we're leaving for Afghanistan's neighbors, and not least of which for the people of Afghanistan, for the Afghanis. To talk about this, talk about what the United States' intentions were from the start, how we've carried those through, what the goal is now, and the problem as we're leaving it for the near neighbors of Afghanistan. We're joined by Mark Sloboda, He's an international relations and security analyst. Mark, thank you for joining us. How are you doing this morning?
Shane, Jamarl, thanks for having me. It's always an honor and a pleasure to be on Fault Lines.
It is an honor and a pleasure every time to have you and to talk with you, Mark. Let's get straight into it. This is a question I like to use to sort of set the conversation up. We've gotten into this, and of course, we're going to be getting into it more as this problem sort of reels out of control, as it shows all the signs of being ready to do at this point. America started this war about 2 decades ago, a little bit under at this point, although we've been involved in the region for far, far longer. What was our goal, as you see it, when we started this war, Mark?
Okay, well, the ostensible goal, the goal we're told, is the war on terror, right? It was to strike back against the terrorists, quote unquote, for 9/11, the attacks on the World Trade Center and the Pentagon, and to prevent further attacks, to take out the terrorists. We invaded and militarily occupied the entire country of Afghanistan because at the time, Al-Qaeda was operating out of Afghanistan and the U.S. government was still in negotiations with the Taliban about being able to either about the Taliban kicking them out of the country or the U.S. allowed to make targeted strikes against them, and the U.S. just invaded in the middle of those negotiations. And in reality, of course, it was a nation-building project, and nation-building in the pursuit of rebuilding the entire region. And there's an overlapping definition of region there because we're talking Central Asia, but we're also talking the Islamic world, because of this, of course, was followed up just a couple of years later by the completely unrelated in real terms invasion and military occupation of Afghanistan, which has also had disastrous geopolitical results for the U.S. So this war on terror was a gigantic geopolitical transformation project centered on the idea of nation building, at least Afghanistan and Iraq, of course, Libya, Syria, others could be added to that tally, to transform them into U.S. allied quote unquote democratic states, although it's far more important that they were allied to the U.S. than they were actually democratic, in order to transform the Islamic world and thus the entire world in pursuit of U.S. global hegemony. And boy, did it go wrong.
That's not a statement. 20 years.
This is an act of utter hubris. Of course, this is the 1990s unipolar moment. The Soviet Union had collapsed. We had, quote unquote, won the Cold War, yes, and the world was our prize.
Yes.
And we this was this act of this moment of supreme unipolar hyperpower arrogance.
Arrogance is one way to
terror.
Put it. Racist is another way to put it. I mean, what does it take for a group to say we are going to reshape an environment and we have the right, the cosmic right to do it? Now, of course, rights are taken. It's not something that is necessarily endowed, but we went with the notion that we are exceptional and we can make a choice and we can change it. And like we spent, trillions of dollars in Afghanistan.
$2 trillion is the latest cost estimate.
Astonishing.
As of right now, and that is not a final tally because the cost of care for the veterans of that war for their entire lives and the interest on the amount that was, of course, taken in debt to finance this war.
And the opportunity cost, if we wanted to get
$24 trillion.
A little bit more abstract.
Yes.
The opportunity cost of all the other things we could have done that with that money that would have been sort of, you assume, like compounding interest. You get good things out of them. If you improve your infrastructure, if you put it into your economy, you know, if you
back to you.
All that stuff, which is this sort of shadow of this series of events that suggests in another universe, things might have been a lot better and we could have done a lot more with this. That's why I brought that up.
Hey, Mark, I'm curious. What does the Taliban want? Meaning, if things keep going the way they're going, I mean, basically they're taking districts like back to back to back to back at this point. What do they want? What is Afghanistan under Taliban rule? And one more question with this. How does that affect Russia? How does that affect Iran? How does that affect the surrounding regions? I'm trying to find, basically what, after they consolidate power, if they indeed consolidate power, what is Afghanistan under Taliban control?
Okay, well, we've already seen that before, so we kind of know. After the U.S., remember that this war actually started some 42 years ago. 42 years ago, the U.S. Democratic President Jimmy Carter signed a U.S. executive order authorizing the arming of the Mujahideen in Afghanistan against the then communist socialist government of Afghanistan. And that was designed, according to Zbigniew Brzezinski, who was Carter's national security advisor, designed to lure the Soviet Union into intervening in Afghanistan to support the communist government there, something they had not been doing, in order to give them their own Vietnam. And we supported jihadis. And we supported what would become, of course, through the natural evolution after the Soviet withdrawal, the Taliban and Al-Qaeda. And that war has essentially been continuing for 42 years since, at least for the Afghanistan. The Soviet Union withdraw, now the U.S. is withdrawing, and after that war will continue in Afghanistan. And the Taliban are best understood. The first thing, Afghanistan, there is no Afghani people, right? And that is a mistake. Afghanistan is kind of a geographical illusion, if you will. There is no one unified Afghani people, right? It's an ethnic and ethno-religiously divided country. And the majority population, of course, are the Pashtun. And that is exemplified, kind of politically, if you will, to the greatest extent by the Taliban.
Yeah.
The Taliban are a Pashtun movement wedded to a Wahhabist, severe Islamic, Sunni Islamic religious ideology, and they want to determine principally all the space of Afghanistan, but at least particularly the space where the Pashtuns are majority or prevalent. But they, of course, are not the only ethnic people in Afghanistan. In northern Afghanistan, there are large Tajik and Uzbek nationally minorities. In the north, they are the majority. And they have always been kind of the center of what is considered secular Afghanistan. Even during the years of complete Taliban rule before the U.S. invasion in 2001, the Taliban never controlled all of Afghanistan. The Soviet government, or the Soviet-backed communist government in Afghanistan lasted 3 years after the Soviet withdrawal and only collapsed when the Soviet Union itself did and couldn't continue funding there. And I sincerely hope, for everyone's sake, other than the Taliban, of course, that the U.S. installed government lasts even a third that long. But I'm not laying bets down on top of that. But they retreated back up into North Afghanistan and became the Northern Alliance, and they held that part of the country against the Taliban essentially for its entirety, because the Pashtun is not a majority there. And that's what I would expect to see. I expect to see central Kabul government collapse. I expect to see Kabul fall back under Taliban rule, and I expect to see a retreat of the ethnic peoples and the more secular Pashtun to the north of the country. And you will also see a retreat into warlordism, something that has never really gone away throughout the entire period of U.S. occupation, but will become more a centrally structural factor of Afghani politics, where people will return to warlords for local security and protection from the Taliban from their particular area, because they're a lot more capable of doing it than any centrally foreign-backed
than the
government
state.
at
Yes.
Afghanistan.
Then the
Yes.
Afghani state. I'm sorry for cutting you in because that was exactly what you were going to say. But to be clear, this is it's a sort of political shift. It's a shift in the functional nature of the makeup of Afghanistan. Which, like you said, I wish there were a word, or at least I knew it, for these sort of colonially contrived national entities like Afghanistan, for instance, which is functionally an attempt to apply like this sort of post-Westphalian conception of states to a region that was previously and still is tribally and ethnically sort of riven, and just functionally, changing their political system. I want to come back to warlordism.
Balkanization is often a word.
That's often applied to it, but that doesn't. What that doesn't include is the idea of creating that as a country, and I just still don't know exactly what that is. Balkanization is a sort of inverse of that, where you take a region and it's a part of it, because I get what you're saying with the nations in the Balkans. But anyway, you brought up Wahhabism. I still view Wahhabism primarily as a Saudi export. Is the relationship between Saudi Arabia and the Taliban through, if you could briefly explain what Wahhabism is the Taliban, if they take over in a year or two, are they going to show any fealty, any sort of lineal, I don't even know, are they going to, any allegiance, a connection, that kind of thing to the Saudis from whence their religious, philosophy, ideology came? Is there going to be that connection there, Mark?
No, I mean, absolutely not. I mean, and Wahhabism, you could actually say, kind of developed out of an anti-government Islamist movement in Egypt, and actually then
more
than
in
Saudi Arabia.
More than Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, more than Saudi Arabia. Although some were figures in exile in Saudi Arabia and so on. It's a little more complicated than that. But there's absolutely no political connection between Saudi Arabia and the Taliban. So that's not something you have to worry about. In fact, to some extent, they're even rivals for influence in the Islamic world, although kind of at opposite ends of it. So that's not a concern. And the Taliban, for their part, they say they've changed, and they say that they are going to allow more women's rights under, of course, the interpretation of Islamic law than they did before. And I, to some extent, I would expect, let's not over-exaggerate.
Well, that's what I was going with this.
That will be true to a smaller extent.
Well, that's what I was going with this. Because at this point, they have to run a country. It's not just, I would imagine, and correct me if I'm wrong, that they would have had to grown over the time frame of the 20 years. And taking over Afghanistan on some level is not just taking over the tribal stuff. It's also, you have a central government that is, I imagine, is doing the things that governments do. And if they're assuming power, aren't they going to have to assume the levers of that power? I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. And what does that look like in practice? Because if you're saying really this tribal living, well, they have to go beyond tribal living at this point if they're assuming control.
Yeah, and of course they will go to a religion and a basic idea of a state or of a caliphate, to do that. And it's really hard to look on paper. On paper, the U.S.-backed government in Kabul, the Afghan National Security Forces, right, number some 352,000 between police and military on paper. That is the investment by the U.S. of over 20 years of more than $90 billion. And the Taliban supposedly only number about 60,000, with another 4,000 to 15,000 with the Haqqani network, and 3,000 or 4,000 Al-Qaeda also in the country, and a few thousand possible ISIS, that are all actually fighting against each other. But you're like, then what is happening? Why has 1/3 of the districts of Afghanistan, of the 421 districts, now some like 150 at least, have fallen, most of them in recent days, to the Taliban since the announcement of the U.S. withdrawal. And Afghani national troops are surrendering in droves. The Taliban are giving troops who surrender transportation money to go home.
Oh, man. That's certainly an incentive. That is, here's bus money, kid.
To just give up and go back to their villages. And you are seeing already the destabilization of the surrounding region, because Afghan border troops, border guards that are in districts that are falling to the Taliban, you've already had some 1,000 Afghan border troops flee into Tajikistan. A lot of them, of course, are probably ethnic Tajik, where they've been given at least temporary refuge. And that shows that there's going to be the migration or the creation of refugees. Some tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people are going to flee into the surrounding countries because they have been allied or working for a foreign-backed government in Kabul, and they're going to want safety. They're going to want a kind of life that they've become used to, and the Taliban are going to, of course, seek to root out those that they can't trust and who have aided, at least to some extent, they will have a purge. And that's something that a lot of people will flee. And then, of course, there's the question, will that lead to the Taliban once again trying to spread into the surrounding countries, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Iran? And of course, there isn't really a solid border between Pakistan and Afghanistan. That's why we referred to it as AFPAC, because the Pakistani government doesn't control their own border with Afghanistan to a very large extent. And those are also Pashtun people on both sides of the border there. So it's going to create a destabilization mess. And that's why Russia, for instance, they helped the U.S. in 2001 go into Afghanistan, right? They provided information, they provided ISR. There's a lot of pretty solid rumors that Russian intelligence and special forces were operating on the ground, helping shore up the alliance with the Northern Alliance, acting as the foot soldiers of the U.S. going in to take over the country. And Russia is voicing noise. They think the U.S. is withdrawing too precipitously. And they're afraid that because Tajikistan and Uzbekistan are their allies, under the Collective Security Treaty Organization, that they're going to have to step in some fashion.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Well, wait, Mark. I want to pause on that.
Not stand for
that is, and we can also talk about China, but that bringing up Russia and what their support in 2001. I had known that. I'd forgotten it. Thank you for the reminder about that. I want to get to the sort of foreign policy aspects of this, but first I want to double down on what Jamarl was saying because I see as pivotal to that. What Jamarl was asking, and I'm going to ask my own version of it, was basically, in my eyes, you have the Taliban as trying to create its own state, trying to create a political institution that can act like a state in the international community. At the same time, though, political scientists will talk about political development and how different cultures can sort of become different levels of states. Neocons will lean on this, the idea that you can't just become a democracy. You need to go through stages of political development or whatever. If you take that seriously, and I would, although with many grains of salt, if you look at the height of Islamic civilization, if we use those labels, it doesn't exactly look like the Taliban. If you look at the origins of algebra in Iraq or whatever, and you look at the civilization that spawned that, it might have come out of at a distance, warlords locally, but they developed an intensified state, with a lot of executive capacity. My point here is that does not look like the Pashtun, does not look like the Taliban. It doesn't look like what we see here. And you were talking about warlordism earlier. We've had conversations with Scott Ritter about councils that the Taliban would pull together, their kind of political system. But that sounds like it's going to be fractious, fragmented, and not able to present a unified front when dealing with other nations diplomatically, when trying to figure things out, when dealing with Russia or China or Iran or any of these regional players that you would assume they'd have to learn to deal with in some way. How's that going to work itself out? If they don't have a state functionally, if they don't have what we would recognize as a consolidated state with a leader that can make decisions on the behalf of all the warlords that, are probably going to come in to fill these gaps here, how are they going to relate? How are they going to, who's going to be having the talks with Putin or with Russia, with China? What's that going to look like? Is there even going to be a level of consistency that will allow them to maintain diplomatic relations with other countries as a state? Mark?
No, and that will return us to at least, no, to some extent. And that will return us to the time period between, 92 and the fall of the socialist Afghan government and 2001. This period where the surrounding states deal as best they can with the Taliban, political leadership, and they will have leadership and foreign representatives to some extent, right? They do actually have negotiators in Qatar, negotiating office there, supposedly to deal with the U.S. installed Afghan national government in Kabul. But of course, they're not even talking to each other at this point. The surrounding governments, including Russia and China, will have to deal with the Taliban. And Russia has already been quietly and very cautiously, with all the appropriate signals to the U.S. Doing that all the time that U.S. presidents started negotiating with the Taliban as well, because they know that once the U.S. leaves, to some extent, such security as there will be for surrounding countries in the region will have to come from countries other than the U.S. at this point. And ultimately, I think that that's going to fall on the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. And I predicted this way back in when I was running Model UN crisis scenarios back in London in around before 2009, 2010. The Shanghai Cooperation Organization is going to have to step in, because that allows Russia and China and India and Pakistan, who are all part of it, along with the Central Asian states, to manage their differences in what they want to see coming out of it. They are the Eurasian political and security organization, such as it is, and they will have an interest. And whether they want to or not, and right now I don't think they really want to, they're going to eventually have to step in at some point, even if that's to help the Taliban control the country, because that might be in their best interest.
That makes more sense. I'm going to pass it to Jamarl here, but NATO being involved does not make nearly as much sense.
No, it doesn't.
as exactly that.
Because the Taliban has already said any NATO troop that's there after 9/11 will be considered an occupying force. And at that point, they have the capacity to enforce that. I think the fascinating part to this is we have gotten so accustomed from the standpoint of the world as organizing ourselves as states. And they have a culture that does not. And it's like, all right, now that they know that it's incumbent and necessary for them to even engage with the world, it's almost like you're plugging in something into an outlet, and they don't necessarily have the tools, or at least we don't know. I mean, I guess we're going to see how this looks on the main stage.
That's not actually unusual, because there's a whole lot of African and Middle East countries that aren't a state, certainly not an ethnic nation state in the way we think of in Europe and the United States, right? This exists all over the world. Most, of course, it's the third world, and yes, there are problems with political and national organization and so on. But it's hardly unusual, although the Taliban may be a particularly, shall we say, fractious version of that. But we see that all over Africa, and that's the problem with the states left behind as the geographic lines left behind by the European colonial empires. It persists to this day.
Britain just drawing lines
the fact
across
that
the map.
there aren't ethnic lines coherent with state lines in Central Asia, around the Pashtun, the Tajik, the Uzbek, and of course it's impossible to do that because to some extent they're always intermingled. And that's the ideology of nationalism. That's why it is the most powerful and bloody and ideology of them all.
Real quick, what is going to happen to the people left behind? So the Washington Post is doing an article, Imperiled for Helping U.S. Troops Stranded by Bureaucracy, Afghan Interpreters See Biden Evacuation Plan as Last Hope. And they're giving an example of one particular gentleman, Abdul Razid Shirzad, where he has a letter with people saying, you're a true hero, and this is a man of great character and integrity. But when he tried to get a stint, and it was like, yeah, this guy didn't help us all that much. And so it's like all of these people are going to be left behind, people who are interpreters, people who help the U.S. military. And I was looking at some of the comments. The guy says, I gave everything to the American troops, and now they're leaving, and they're certain of whether or not they're going to be able to go with them. So 30 seconds. What's going to happen to these guys?
Yeah, lots of people are going to die. Lots of people are going to they're going to be displaced, they're going to be refugees in nearby countries. There'll be some limited asylum in the U.S. and the West, but that never reaches the level of the people that, that were involved with the U.S. While it was there. And, we saw echoes of this in Vietnam, all the way back in the 1970s. So, there's going to be a lot of people, a lot of families that are really going to, suffer. And it's pretty much inevitable.
Mark,
and the U.S. should have thought of that before they went in.
But Mark, the voice that you guys are listening to, international relations and security analyst Mark Sloboda. You can follow Mark on Twitter at Mark Sloboda1 and find him on Facebook at facebook.com/Gramsci. You guys are listening to Fault Lines with Thomas and Stranahan. Back in a moment.
Listening to Radio Sputnik. Telling the untold.
Fault Lines.
Live from across the divided states of America, it is time now for the last hour this morning of the most disruptive show covering news, politics, events, and more from across these disunited states we call America and the increasingly divided surface we call our globe. In the independent corner, I'm your political analyst, Shane Stranahan.
And in the left corner, I am the indefatigable, the ever vigilant, the last man on the wall, your political analyst, Jamarl Thomas.
And together, you listening to us should be listening to Fault Lines with Thomas and Stranahan. Sometimes trying to say things the cute and the clever way, it just gets your tongue tied. And
at the last minute, yeah. It's like, all right, it's like all right, I'm going to make this last change. It's going to be phenomenal.
Exactly. This will be great. This will be brilliant. Nobody ever thought of it before. And then you fall on your face. That's just how that one works.
It happens.
Yeah. Anyway.
Right, let's do the headlines. In the news, about 5,371 new COVID cases were reported in the United States yesterday, although this weekend was the 4th, and there were about 41 new deaths. Over the past week, there's been an average of about 11,797 cases per day, an increase of 5% from the average 2 weeks earlier. 47% of the total American public has been vaccinated or fully vaccinated, and 55% of residents have received at least one dose. As of this morning, the coronavirus has infected 33,690,446 people across the United States and has killed 4,793 human beings. The UK's Health Secretary, Sajid Javid, I don't know, I have such a hard time saying that man's name. I've been watching him for years, but still.
Sajid Javid, something like that? Replacing Matt Hancock? Notoriously recently?
Yeah. So, Sajid Javid has warned of a possible 100,000 new cases per day in Britain that may be coming this summer. This comes as Boris Johnson has confirmed that most mandates are to be undone. The rest of the Florida condo building was demolished this Sunday as local authorities still struggle to unearth the remaining victims of the condo collapse. This comes as Hurricane Elisa bears down on the region. Elsa, thank you. The Taliban has continued to capture territory in Afghanistan, seizing more than 10 districts in 24 hours. The troops are advancing rapidly as NATO forces withdraw. World oil prices have reached their highest level since 2014. This follows a failure between the members of OPEC to come to an agreement to increase the output of oil depending on, or despite, surging oil demands. The prices have risen to nearly $77 a barrel. The former challenger for Belarusian President Viktor Babayarka has been sentenced to 14 years in prison. Authorities in Nigeria's Kaduna state have ordered all schools to close following a mass abduction of over 100 kids this weekend. Those are your headlines. You guys are listening to Fault Lines with Thomas and Stranahan. So another story I want to add to this. China targets ride-hailing giant Didi and data crackdown after U.S. listing. And you may know more about this one because you brought this one to my attention, but I'll just read the top to give a basic context. China is widening a crackdown on tech companies as Beijing grows wary of the sprawling reach and power of the country's internet giants and signals it is prepared to rein them in despite the financial disruption. The country regulators on Sunday ordered the removal of Didi Xunxing, China's equivalent of Uber, from domestic app stores, dealing a blow to the company just days after its landmark U.S. listing. On Monday, authorities expanded their sites to at least 3 other platforms, including truck-hailing apps and recruitment service. Didi will remain banned by app stores until further notice, as it was found to have, quote, illegally collected and used users' personal information, unquote, in a grave violation of law and regulation. China's cyberspace regulators said in a statement on Sunday after 2-day cybersecurity review. So they are basically pulling rank on tech companies. And like you said, this was immediately after a listing, a U.S. listing, and they were like, yeah, you guys have a problem with your company that we need to review. It becomes that. Now, the catch becomes, why is China doing this? And the catch, and I think the point, oftentimes when we were talking about this, I often ask, how does China maintain its dominance? Meaning, how does the Communist Party maintain dominance when you have a world of all of these other things that are trying to grab power and space? Meaning cash, in this case, tech, or businesses. It seems like they're riding the capitalistic animal for their ends. And it's like, all right, how do you ride that without being overly influenced by that and maintain power as a communist party, considering you're a communist party? It's like you're touching that taboo thing that you're supposed to be hating, but you realize, all right, we can use this to our ends. But how do you stop Godzilla from getting out? It's that. And in this case, is that what this is? Where they're like, okay, we need to halt this for reasons of power and maintaining dominance and leverage, et cetera? Or is there some other reason for this? I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Probably both. I'll put it like this. We do the same thing with our tech companies too. It's just that they're in the States. So when Facebook...
Or antitrust, for example.
Yeah, exactly. When we do antitrust, I mean, it's a different justification, but we do the same kind of power politics thing by trying to keep tech companies from getting too powerful, simply. And that's, on its surface. Just why you do an antitrust thing is that, okay, this organization has too much power in our society. The question then is, compared to who or whom, compared to what?
Yeah.
The response is the government broadly, or in a general sense,
they would say people, right.
People, the public.
They would say it screws up their capability of making a good choice, or it's unfair in regards to organization of power and the public interest. Is not a public interest in regards to purchasing power.
Yes, but if you look at it at face value, it is a competition between the government and a rising corporate sector, which is the same way. Those are the same terms that you're casting this in with China. My point is the same dynamic is at play.
Yeah.
China, the CCP probably has a difference. Differences in tactics, strategy, outlook, all that stuff. But by and large,
the reason
the same dynamic. The same dynamic exists. Which is my point. Now, this comes, like you said, just a week after they did their IPO. Didi, this company, did their IPO. This is the largest ride-sharing app service,
like Uber,
in China. It'd be like if you thought of if there were a clear winner between Uber and Lyft, which I think is Uber, but it's last I checked, it was a little bit of a toss-up. If there were one, this would be the equivalent for that in China. Why are they doing it? Like you're saying, power politics, that's part of it. But you can also see this, it's worth bringing up, arguably for the same reason that we're super worried about Huawei, arguably for the same reason that the United States is worried about other countries creating the digital infrastructure that we are going to be using, that our citizens are going to be using, that kind of thing, where they're talking about the hardware, the software, whatever the case may be. They have valid concerns about that too. Our concerns about that, in my opinion, are valid. If the United States or Great Britain or whatever wants to get worried about China surreptitiously trying to deal with us, through subterfuge, through whatever, hacking, just through
technology,
data collection with the technology, there's a national security interest, which in my opinion is legitimate.
Yeah.
They can have the exact same interest or the exact same concerns about us. And the fact that it's a company based in China doesn't mean that it hasn't been co-opted over time by American programmers. The fact that it's going to be listed on Wall Street, the fact that, who owns it, the shareholders are probably going to have outsized influence, and those shareholders probably are not going to be Chinese unless there's some concerted effort to make them a CCP-owned public company. You get what I'm saying, which I don't see how that happens. Either way, it's a power competition, but the concerns there are both justification and can be seen as genuine. It's a genuine concern.
So it says the state-owned tabloid Global Times applauded the regulator's action, saying it ensures the government sets the rules in data collection, not industry leaders such as Alibaba or Didi. Meaning, this is kind of this is the point, right? It's like, all right, what is the interest here? Well, the prevailing interest of the Communist Party is not profit. That's not it. That's not, meaning the point of it all is not how much money you can make or the business and that type. That's not their point. Their point is, okay, how do we have a stable society, et cetera? And business is going to be subordinate within the context of that society.
Yeah.
And so, no, Alibaba is not going to set the rules. No, Didi is not going to set the rules that they're going to run on the road by. We are. It may be something like that, like a power play in regards to what are the rules going forward in regards to these industries.
Yes.
What do they want if profit was the domain? And in the U.S., we let them ride on that. But like you said, we have different framing of it. We would say this is an antitrust violation because you guys are merging and you're not creating a good business environment. You're creating a monopoly, et cetera, et cetera.
And we're willing to do it when they go too far. It's just a different standard, I think.
Different standard.
You know, different standard.
And a different reason.
But also, it's worth reminding, too, about Jack Ma. You know, big, you know, Alibaba, big dude, wealthy dude who China effectively took on and dethroned, although he's still, you know, kicking and is still respected and listened to.
They still need him.
But yeah, yes, but
that's what I mean. It's like they use capitalism as a tool, not as a thing unto itself where it runs wild.
They need somebody like him, but they don't necessarily need him specifically.
They just need somebody in the role.
They can push him out of that role.
Yeah.
They can dethrone that corporation if it means that other people who look at what made that corporation successful, imitate them, come in, take their place, and are more in allegiance, more, you know.
That's right.
Closely wed to what the CCP wants, that kind of thing.
But think about how that is, though. It's fascinating when you really think about it. It's almost as if the structures that we come up with perform similar functions despite their rationale being different. So you would have so now situation. So in their case, it's almost as if they say, okay, we need big companies to do X and Y. Okay, great. In order for these big companies to do X and Y, but they're still working at the leisure of the public or the state. That's the catch. Now in the United States, we would say we need big companies to do X and Y also. And so the state will have these free market guys like Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos, and they would give these guys money in order to keep those companies up and keep those companies running, even though they would say those companies are separate and distinct from the state, despite the fact that they're running on money from the state. I guess to make it the point where in China, it seems that they're saying, look, we have these companies, but these companies are working in the capacity of the state. And the way we put in changing a light bulb, we could potentially change leadership if necessary. It seems like it's more of a clear, we're using this for X. It's not a thing unto itself.
It's true.
It's like capitalism that means there is
arguably a key difference here, which is we're in America less willing to tread on those people's toes. We're less willing to treat those people as light bulbs, and maybe for good reason, because this is when people talk about innovation and how China is incapable of innovation. I couldn't disagree more. But there's a side of that. There's a point they could make that's adjacent to their point that, in my opinion, would be accurate, which is the slightly more nuanced or developed one, which is there are genuine things about having a culture of individualism that promotes innovation in certain ways. That doesn't mean that a state can't pursue innovation. It doesn't mean that a state couldn't do something like the Manhattan Project, which we did, that very successfully promotes not just nuclear power, but nuclear weaponry and significant advancements across the board. But having a culture that promotes individualism and having the idea that individual people can become wealthy as sin based on some innovation or some new way of doing things, and that we should protect their right to whatever. That's fundamental. You know, and that is a difference, and it's going to have cultural impact. But I think that you're making another point too, which is, you know, kind of argues with mine, but kind of argues another point.
They gave free space for it. They basically gave an area. It was like, all right, have fun. And if you notice, the amount of inequality and everything else spiked, just like here. You do have people who are fantastically wealthy, but they're still under the auspices of the state. That's the catch.
And there are similarities, there are differences, culturally there are significant differences, but we tend to gloss over the similarities. And we talk about socialism with Chinese characteristics. There's a thing that I think I've said before on air that somebody I respect and read online, this guy named Samo said, which is right now we're all talking about socialism with Chinese characteristics. At some point, we might start talking about capitalism with American characteristics or something like this. Our locus might stop being ourselves as China starts to dominate. Right now, we are the center ideologically. And it's like, okay, what is China's political philosophy? Well, they're doing socialism with their own sort of modified version. And ours is kind of the baseline. What might happen is a subtle inversion where our elites start seeing them as the locus and the model and start adopting and imitating them. And all the while with a weird sort of tongue-in-cheek, we're kind of unaware of it. We kind of don't like talking about it. It makes us a little bit anxious, but we're still nevertheless acting as if they're the actual leaders. I see that coming.
Or like this kind of slight modification of our own political system, which I don't quite know what that looks like in practice. Because look, whatever. I mean, people can take hits at China, and yes, I would prefer to live here as opposed to live there.
Yes,
but they, I mean, you have to give them credit where credit is due. Lifting 200 million people out of poverty in 20 years, that's extraordinary. And so you can't necessarily ding into the political system entirely, especially for the stability standpoint. But yeah, I agree. I think though what they've been able to do is to use that creativity almost in a sandbox. It's very strange. It's like, all right, we're gonna confine it to this, and this kind of his own project. And my thing is, can you keep it in bordered like that? And how long are you going to be able to do this where we are saying, okay, yeah, we're going to bring these guys in, we're going to lower the hammer, as opposed to the effect coming the other way around, where the party itself is being influenced by capital, which is my thing. It's like, how do you prevent that from taking place? How do you prevent the infection from seeping in, especially when people realize that capital allows their reality space all sorts of powers if you soak into this kind of capitalistic mindset.
Yeah.
So it's like, how do you prevent that? That's the part I'm interested in.
If I could speak not as an expert, but as somebody who's read a little bit about this, it seems like the intent with Deng Xiaoping specifically, who undertook the whole opening up of China and the reconciliation with capitalism and the reconciliation with America and the West and that whole thing. It seemed like the intent there was that it would work in both directions, but that ultimately the state would be in control. But this is why Deng Xiaoping, it's not just the special economic zones. It's like the sort of regional autonomy where individual regions could pursue weird, innovative, groundbreaking economic and production policies and act more like states, have more autonomy. Yeah. And they could have the freedom to do that. It's sort of the let 100 flowers bloom kind of thing, but applied to the economy. Let's see how different regions try things out. Let's see which ones work. And then we can copy that, imitate that on the higher level. And then the assumption there is going to be, you are going to get some inverted influence. Yeah. You're going to try to change what the regions do. And then they're probably going to give you things that change what you do too. But ultimately, who's in charge? Well, the assumption is the party's in charge. Yeah. And that's probably the case going forward. But in mind there is, it's a bit of a two-way street too. Yeah. And that seems to be intentional. Yeah. And I don't know how else it could work, frankly, because that's what sort of lets you learn, but ultimately, and you want to have the state be in control. And the same, we got philosophical for a second. We will experiment. Human beings will individually experiment with all sorts of different ways. But the assumption is there's some ego, there's some person in charge that can come back to themselves, figure out what works, and do that. You know what I mean?
Well, that was the point of states, though, right? I mean, 50 states, each state is kind of their little own sandbox, and there's a feedback mechanism to the higher part if the state is doing something that works and functions. Yeah. I mean, think of healthcare. Obama taking Romney's idea, and saying, okay, we're going to make this for the entire nation. That's basically a sandbox, and somebody picking something from that sandbox and applying.
It is, but it depends on which one you start from. Yeah. With the United States, we started on the level of states. We were a colonial project with states owned by individuals and shareholders, and then when we went independent, it's how do you unify these disparate states? Yeah. They went the opposite way. They had, as far as I can tell, a consolidated state that they then try, okay, let's experiment with things. Let's try to open things up. Yeah. You know what I mean? Now, they're coming towards the same direction, but they're coming from opposite ends of the spectrum, which means that results are probably going to be different, in my opinion. Anyway, we need to go to our break. 202-521. Wait, we're not taking calls. I was sorry.
No.
You go into your mode sometimes. We're going to be coming back. Lauren Steiner talking about a bunch of stuff on the left, the progressive left, weird movements that I'll let Jamarl lead the conversation on because he's more in tune with this stuff. Anyway, you're listening to Fault Lines with Thomas and Stranahan. Be right back on the other side of the short break.
Fault Lines. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We give you the most essential information out there. Radio Sputnik, telling the untold.
You check top.
We couldn't put it better ourselves. Tune in to Political Misfits on Mondays at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for Miss the Press, our weekly takedown of Sunday's toothless news talk shows.
Radio Sputnik. We speak your language. Find us at SputnikNews.com. Fault Lines.
Welcome back to Fault Lines on Radio Sputnik. My name is Jamarl Thomas. I'm joined with my co-host Shane Stranahan, coming to you live out of our station in Washington, D.C. If you guys live in the area, you can catch us on radio at 105.5 FM and 1390 AM. We're also in Kansas City at 102.9 FM and 104.7 FM. If you guys are digging what Shane and I are putting down, whatever platform you're consuming this content on, give us a like and share that audio or video. If you want to join in on the conversation, you can send us a chat, a tweet, and of course, you can reach us by phone at 202-521-1320. That is 202-521-1320. Your engagement helps make the show what it is, so definitely don't be shy. So the left has hit the skids, and that's to put it mildly. Whether you've been paying attention to this or not, there's been a weird phenomena on the left where it has been basically eating itself. You had Sanders. Sanders' ghost was run. There's this emancipatory organization of people behind this notion of policy. People are happy. They're standing in 7-hour lines, but it's a love fest. Sanders fails. The movement collapses. And the energy and power that went into this unification of purpose and of policy, purpose of policy, collapses into bitterness and it eating itself. Meaning the energy, as opposed to going in any other direction, it basically went internal. This was best expressed, and I would say Force the Vote was probably a good case. It's expressed in the conflict that seems to be taking place now between TYT, Aaron Matei, Jimmy Dore, and Kyle Kalinske is the other one that has been dragged into this. Cancel culture on the left. What has happened to the left? And these names, these are big YouTubers. Some of these guys have like 500,000 viewers, 500,000 subscribers. Nearly, I think Kyle maybe even have 1 million. So these are big, big names on the left that have basically gone to war, eating each other. To have a conversation about this, we're joined with Lauren Steiner. She's a grassroots activist and organizer who fights the privatization of public institutions and public good. She was very involved with Occupy LA, started and ran Los Angeles for Bernie Sanders, and was a delegate for him at the Democratic National Convention. She also hosts a twice-weekly live show, The Robust Opposition, Sunday and Wednesday nights at 7 p.m. on her personal Facebook page. It covers local, state, and national issues, featuring interviews with activists, organizers, and independent journalists, elected officials, and progressive candidates. Lauren, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us. I appreciate this on short notice.
Well, thank you for having me, Jamarl. I always enjoy talking to you.
And I always enjoy talking to you, too. Her and I talked like last night for like 2 hours. It's easy to talk to. So let's talk about the left. I have been greatly, I don't want to call it disillusioned, disheartened might be the word for it. It's this notion of what I once thought was this group that was on policy has fallen apart, where policy seems to have nothing to do with it. And it seems to be eating itself. And the latest person in this is Kyle Kalinske. What happened to the left, Lauren? And I'll just leave it as an open question like that.
Well, you know, they can't even agree on what's the left. You know, they're talking about TYT being liberal, like MSNBC, and not really leftist. So when you can't even agree who's what, you're really in trouble. And I just want to start by saying, I think you said Sanders failed. I think he was sabotaged, and I think you probably agree with that.
Yeah.
But the fact is that he did try twice, and he was sabotaged by the liberal left, the establishment, if you will, the corporate Democrats. And the fact of the matter is people need leaders. And you mentioned Occupy. I was very involved with Occupy. And we prided ourselves on being a leaderless movement, or as some of us called it, a leaderful movement. But that's very difficult to pull off. And let's face it, there's a lot of people that are not going to go occupying public parks, camping out in public parks, protesting in front of banks, but they are going to join a presidential campaign. So Occupy, a lot of people say it failed, but I feel that they didn't fail because they changed the national conversation from the phony issue of the debt and the deficit to the real issue of wealth and income inequality between the 1% and the 99%. So I think Occupy set the stage for Sanders' campaign, and he really did try, but he was sabotaged, and, you know, now we're back to square one. But the fact is that people, you know, they need leaders, and they also need heroes and villains, good guys and bad guys. And the left was not, or I should say left media, was not going to criticize Trump because the corporate mainstream media was doing that 24/7. but they weren't criticizing him for the horrible things that he was doing to the 99%. Because if they got into those things, they'd have to admit that the Democrats, did the same thing. The corporate Democrats did the same thing. So it was all about his style and all that pearl clutching that they were doing about Trump. So what happened to, I think, left media was they needed to start criticizing the corporate Democrats. They were all who was left. And I have to say, I was even a little bit guilty of it, because when Bernie promoted Russiagate, when he tweeted 5 times in 24 hours the BS about Russiagate, I did a live stream on Facebook entitled Bernie Sanders STFU, and it got 12,000 views, and that's a lot for me. So you see what happens with social media and YouTube with their algorithms. They just love when you're ranting and you're angry, when you're criticizing someone. And I think to some extent, Jimmy Dore, who is a friend of mine, who did 3 events in my home, fundraisers for 2 of them were for progressive candidates, and 1 of them was for the medics of Standing Rock. He's a guy with a big heart. He really cares about these issues. But, like Kyle said, he's got one level, and it's nuclear. Yeah. And I've seen him be rational. But on this thing, when he started with Force the Vote and he villainized AOC.
Well, just so to give context. So TYT comes out and basically attacks Aaron Matei as if he's paid as a Russian stooge. This, of course, is not true. And Aaron Matei, in many respects, doesn't even come on the show or the network because he doesn't want to be cast as that. And they're basically throwing this aspersion out. Now, the catch becomes it starts to bring in other people. And there's a tweet that Jimmy Dore apparently liked, that Cal saw and responded to. This ends up bringing in Dore and Cal, which Cal are friends, right? I mean, they're supposedly friends, or Cal at least thinks they are. But like you said, one thing, nuclear. And so you had this thing where all of these lefty YouTubers end up at each other's throats. And I look at it and think, well, I don't feel like I'm a part of any of this. This is a petty drama, and you guys are eating each other alive. That's how I look at it. And so that's just to give people an understanding of what was taking place. But go ahead, Laura, please continue.
Well, I was just going back to Force the Vote because that's when it started. And I think that, TYT was dismissive of it, and Jimmy is very sensitive. He takes a lot of things personally. I can relate to that. I'm sort of the same way. The thing is, I'm not public about it, and I don't have his platform. But, he divides people, his friends, his enemies, and there's kind of no nuance there. And I think Kyle tried to create some nuance, and Jimmy wasn't having any of it. And I don't really want to get into the particulars of what they were fighting about. Yeah. Yes, I do agree, because I've been doing my own live streaming about Syria and Russiagate since 2015. Yeah. So I don't need to go to Jimmy Dore form an opinion about this, or Aaron Matei form an opinion about this. I have my own opinion about this. And I think, Glenn Greenwald, I'm not going to talk about what he wrote, but he just did something yesterday on his Substack. It was a video in which he talked about that this was a microcosm of 2 very disturbing trends among liberals, which was to slam everybody as a Russian asset, a Russian agent, or to weaponize the Me Too movement. And I do think that, Anna's tweet hit her 1-minute rant there was unhinged.
Yes, it was.
Emailed Cenk, who I know personally. I've known him since Occupy. I think he's very good on domestic issues. I think he really has a blind spot on,
international politics. Yeah.
I don't necessarily agree. And Jimmy said when I interviewed him at my house at one of these events, Jimmy even said he doesn't think it's because of the Katzenberg money. Remember, Cenk used to be a Republican. Right. He's come quite far, but he just doesn't get the foreign policy.
You're telling us that because you're trying to. Why are you telling us that? Meaning, why are you saying or telling us that Cenk, or let's say TYT, that's what people probably know a little bit better, the Young Turks, that, look, it's these guys do have lefty policies, even though they may be divergent on other things. Like, you're telling us that for a reason.
It sounds like you're still in the reconciliatory mode, where there's a kumbaya coming at some point.
Exactly.
Where maybe we can come back to the campfire.
So
that kind of thing.
is that what you're trying to explain? Like, look, the left has gotten to the point where it's eating itself, and it's eating itself in a way where, because I wrote a post the other day saying I would love to get back to the point where policy is the thing that matters. Like, where it's like, hey, do you believe in Medicare for all? And do you believe people should get Social Security expanded? And do you believe that people should get at least 15 and livable wage, et cetera, et cetera? Do you believe in those things? Yay or nay? And getting back to that, because it seems that has nothing to do with any of this. And it's like the left is losing profoundly and yet eating itself. And I don't think those things are unrelated to one another. So what are you telling us that for? It's like, look, there needs to be some level of reconciliation between people in the way that they involve the left. Why do you think that people are at each other's throats like that, despite the fact that policy-wise, they're like 90% similar?
Making a comment about media. I got into media, and I wanted to be a broadcast journalist I'm dating myself, since my high school days in the 1970s, because I wanted to make a difference. I'm going to give you an example. Geraldo Rivera, before he became what he became, was a reporter for the nightly news, ABC in New York City. He did a report on the Willowbrook Mental Institution, where patients were sitting in their own feces and urine and were being beaten up by caretakers. And it was shocking, and it led to the close of Willowbrook and the entire reformation of mental institutions. And I looked at that as a young, impressionable teenager, and I said, I want to work in that. I wanted to work in media to do good, to bring light what is going on in the world to people so that they would do something about it. Also in that time, Barbara Walters interviewed Governor Rockefeller's wife. She had breast cancer. Nobody talked about breast cancer back then, or any kind of cancer. It was considered shameful. She went on the Today Show and talked about mammograms, and the next day 50,000 women made appointments for mammograms. So these two events were seminal in my evolution to become a broadcast journalist. And I fell into public access cable TV and did community television for many years. And now, in my 60s, I'm kind of finally doing what I want to do, which is a show about policy, a show about legislation. The robust opposition, as you mentioned, focuses on activists and organizers, because I want to bring to light these fights that people are having and show people how they can plug in. But unfortunately, media has become a commodity. And we saw that with news in the 1980s when Larry Tisch from Lowe's bought CBS. Before, William Paley, who had on the storied, venerable Edward R. Murrow, knew that news was a lost leader. They weren't trying to make money off the news division. But then they had such a huge success with 60 Minutes. And 60 Minutes talks about problems, but they don't talk about them systemically. They talk about them as bad actors. And they'll do a story on Bernie Madoff, but they'll not do a show about Wall Street corruption and how it's been enabled by both parties, okay? So what happens is when you have media that is not publicly supported, like the BBC or just like you talked about, I fight the privatization of public goods and institutions. Media should be publicly supported so that we don't have to go hawking for money, just like politicians go dialing for dollars. Because these people, sadly, who are providing some of the best information about what is really going on the left, have to go out to their viewers for money with their Patreon accounts or their YouTube ads or whatever.
But I disagree, but I don't know how much I want to make this an argument because then we get stuck on it.
Wait, she's not finished, because she's trying to get to the point of basically saying that what I think you're trying to say is they're incentivized to basically fight as opposed to provide news because it gives viewers.
I get that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. They need to make heroes and villains. They need to make good guys and bad guys. They need to have no nuance. And they need to talk about the horse race. We always talk about the mainstream corporate media, how they focus on the horse race and they don't focus on policy. Well, what are we doing right now? with this diversion. And one final point I want to make, too, is I blame the viewers. I don't necessarily blame them, but I say they have a part in this, too. Because as I read these comments, I see things like, oh, knock him dead, Jimmy, or you got him, Jimmy, or hit him one more time, Jimmy. It's like I'm watching professional wrestling. Or they say, literally, I've copied these comments. I've screenshot these comments. They say, oh, I can't wait for the next episode of the Jimmy Dore TYT show, like it's some sort of daytime soap opera.
Yeah, exactly. Soap opera came to mind, too. Exactly. I get you. And yes, it is the viewer's fault to that extent. And yes, there are incentives at play, but it's not like there's ever been anything other than yellow journalism as the standard for journalism. It's not like, you know, without Patreons, people, I'll put it like this, the resentment and the feelings of judgment that we have towards journalists, I would argue that we have that because there was a golden age of journalism, not because journalism as a profession has always been pure, or for that matter, has always even existed. It's a relatively recent thing, and broadcasting, of course, fits into that too. But fundamentally what I'm saying is the monetization of this stuff isn't anything new, and the specific flavor that it puts on it, where you have this sort of spectator, audience, participant dynamic where people, you know, move from Periscope over to Twitter, where they're suddenly, you know, switching from being a member of the audience to suddenly a participant in these ongoing conversations. That adds fuel to the fire. But the incentive to betray your journalistic intent to do bad work functionally has always been there, as far as I can tell. And what this seems to reflect for me, therefore, is the culture that's at play. Whatever the community's like, however these people are falling prey to these incentives, whatever's going on. You brought up Jimmy Dore's psychology. You know, that's psychology. I can bring up sociology. It seems like there's something culturally going on here, because you can imagine a world. I'll put it like this. I don't consider myself a leftist, but of all the media I have at play, if there was something that made sense for me to align myself with, for me to consistently pay attention to, it would probably be the alternative left-leaning media in the States and around the world. And yet they're stuck in high school cliques and stuck, like you're saying, like navel-gazing over social dynamics and cultural issues and constantly being at war with each other, at least recently, like you're talking about. It doesn't seem healthy. And if it's whether it's the psychology or the sociology, if I set aside for the second that there are incentives that are forcing them to do this, it just doesn't seem like they're the way forward. And you were talking, what loaded this conversation in, we were talking about originally was Bernie Sanders as a leader that pulled people together. After his second failure, it seems like he faded away. And since then, there is no leader. Therefore, people are trying to figure out who that is. They're circling the wagons against whatever outgroup they've momentarily identified. And that's the state of play right now. But isn't it just a problem with the people that we're talking about, or is it just a problem with the incentives? Lauren?
Well, it could be human nature. I mean, I told Jamarl that I wanted to read this brief quote about a term called bread and circuses that was coined in the 1st century A.D. Okay, so we're talking about ancient Rome.
Panem et circenses. I think that's the Latin for it. Go for it.
Panem, yes, exactly, is a metonymic phrase referring to superficial appeasement. It is attributed to Juvenal, a Roman poet active in the late 1st and early 2nd century. It is used commonly in cultural, particularly political contexts. In a political context, the phrase means to generate public approval, not by excellence in public service or public policy, but by diversion, distraction, or by satisfying the most immediate or base requirements of a populace by offering a palliative, for example, food, bread, or entertainment.
Gifts, basically, gifts and entertainment. That gets it. And it serves to distract them. And it destroys, I think what the Juvenal's point was, it destroys the citizenry. It destroys their commitment to the state, because they're like dole recipients. And I don't mean to denigrate people who are, need welfare, but the point is it makes you effectively a dependent on the state.
Well, I was wanting to read the last paragraph because it underscores your point. Juvenal, who originated the phrase, used it to decry the, quote, selfishness of common people and their neglect of wider concerns. The phrase implies the population's erosion or ignorance of civic duty as a priority. And that leads me to the story of Stuff, which was a great video done by Annie Leonard, who is now the executive director of Greenpeace. And the thesis of this video was that Americans do a great job of exercising their consumer muscle, but not a very good job of exercising their citizen muscle. And that's partially, I think, because of our educational system and also because of our media. Because, in Europe, they do a much better job. People are out on the streets a lot more. And in my opinion, this whole thing about what the squad should do or shouldn't do, I mean, AOC is one of 435 people. There's only a half a dozen like her. There's no way they're going to be able to force a vote. I think the whole strategy was wrong. I don't think the tactic was wrong. I think what I find ironic was that the whole Bernie was actually trying to force a vote on $15 an hour, getting it into the latest CARES bill. They were ignoring this. They could have been promoting it, but they were ignoring this because they were sitting there criticizing DSA and the nurses union, who actually are the only groups that send organizers out to educate people about what Medicare for All is. They keep saying 88% of Democrats and 52% of Republicans are for Medicare for All, but that's only when it's explained to them. And they may be for it, but they're not exactly beating down the doors of their politicians begging for Medicare for All. They're putting the cart before the horse. Before they can force a vote, they need to get more co-sponsors on board. And you know, they had a moment. They had a moment where Bernie was there with $15 an hour, and they could have gotten behind it, but they were too busy kind of beating this dead horse of Medicare for All. And Bernie is realistic. I mean, I don't think he's failed. I think what he's doing right now to try to lower the Medicare age, to try to get vision, dental, hearing, and mental health included into it, and to give them, to give Medicare the ability to negotiate with the drug companies, would be a major incremental reform.
But see, that's just it. From their standpoint, from their ideological framing, that's not enough. That's not Medicare for All, and so that's not enough. So that's not considered a win, even though it's a win.
Right. But
I mean, it's exactly what you do in a political context when you don't have perfect options. That's what you want them to do.
That's called leadership organizing and activism with Marshall Gans, who was behind Barack Obama's, you know, successful campaign. And, you know, he started out as a freedom rider, then he worked for Cesar Chavez, and he's got organizing down to an art and a science. And he says you have to have incremental wins to boost morale, to grow your movement. So that's what we need to do. And if you don't want to do that, then stay out of electoral politics, because that's what that's all about. Also, I learned in college, you know, 45 years ago in Government 101, that politicians exist to get reelected. They don't exist to do good things for their constituents.
Right.
In my opinion, just to sum up, I think people need to be doing direct action. They need to occupy their representative's office. They need to blockade the building of these pipelines. They need to disrupt these bullshit town halls.
Hey,
You can't say that.
you can't say that.
Quick heads up.
Yeah, just a heads up. But I mean,
Oh, sorry.
no,
Okay.
you're fine. You're
Good.
fine. You spirited to get into it. I totally understand it. I understand. I totally get that. But that doesn't seem to be happening. And in the context of it not seem to be happening, even in the political space. I mean, look, I agree with you, but I disagree with you on the AOC stuff. The force to vote stuff, I do think wins are dependent upon what the person is trying to accomplish. And if the objective was to get forced to vote and to get Medicare, then they were insane to believe that they were going to get Medicare for this tactic. It wasn't going to work for that. The most that you were going to get was to try to get a compromise on something else. But again, that's the politics of it, right? But it seems that the politics of it has fallen prey to people who are just ideological actors who don't quite know how it works, or in the way that you put it, are there to get clicks, and, you know, righteous indignation gets clicks, even if it's not politically savvy or, for that matter, politically reasonable. And screaming that AOC is not for Medicare is insane. Like, it's just insane. But I do think that on some other issues, not so much the criticism. So, for example, let's say it's not forced to vote. Let's say it's trying to get $15 an hour over the finish line, and you have enough votes to crash the bill going forward, meaning they want to pass the bill. The bill is $1,400 instead of $2,000. But the $15 an hour that was supposed to be there, the House puts it there. The president said he wants it, and Joe Manchin takes it out, and the House just goes along its merry way and say, we got to win. Now, I look at that and I say, oh my God, that's not a win. And that the people who were the lefties who were screaming bloody murder, that they need to change the politicians, that we need to primary some folks and all that stuff, and they get people riled up saying, yes, we're going to do this. They get the opportunity, and it collapses. Yes, for me, there is scorn and bitterness over that, because that was one of the situations where, yeah, it was time to go to the mat for that, just because of the situation that you presented, and you did have power in that situation, in that specific context, even though I understand that you have to work with the majority at sometimes. And now we may disagree on this because to me, they should have crashed that bill because Joe Manchin has no more right to take it out as the House to put it in. And if the president is backing us, then yes, I do think you should embarrass the president, and I think you should embarrass the House, and doing so by screaming that these guys don't care about American workers and that they're trying to take food out of the mouths of babies in order to show how much they hate American workers. I mean, yeah, that line of argument comes up the moment that Joe Manchin is going to take $15 an hour out. Why do you hate the American workers so much that you don't believe that they're worth a starvation wage? Like, it's that. But they didn't do that.
With you. I agree with you. I think, as I said, I think force the vote is a good tactic. I just didn't think they had the elements in place with Medicare for all. There was no bill involved. There was no one.
No. I'm not talking about the force of the vote. I agree with you on force of the vote. Totally agree with you on force of the vote.
I'm talking about what you said about $15 an hour. I agree with you. They should have done it. But here's the thing. In the House, there aren't enough progressives to have held up that bill in the House. It would have had to have been done in the Senate. And the Senate is a 50-50 situation.
No, they only have, what, there's 6 people of the squad. You only needed like 2. You only needed like 2. Like it was on party line vote. That's literally what gives Joe Manchin power in the House. In the Senate. Because Joe Manchin could say, I'm not doing this and I can walk away. Well, if you have 2 or 3 people that basically end up with the same power in the House where they say, yeah, we're not doing this, and they walk away, it's the same thing.
But they don't have the majority. The squad doesn't have the majority. Even if every 6 men, they couldn't have held up the bill. I don't understand why you think that. There's 435 people,
right,
in the House.
Right.
And if 6 people voted no on the CARES Act, it still would have passed. It's not enough people.
How many Democrats? Basically, you have X number of members of the squad, but the margins of the House are close at this point. They're extremely close.
I don't think we should waste time on the show doing the math because I don't think we fundamentally disagree.
Yeah,
sounds like it. I want to step in here, Lauren. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for taking the time. We got one caller on, and they've got a question for you. I want to make sure we get to him before we go into our break here. We have Anthony calling in from Detroit. You got a question for Lauren? What's on your mind, Anthony?
Hey guys, yeah, I'll try to call in another time to finish what I was kind of trying to say about before about having a show in particular about with different perspectives. But before I'm wasting any more time, what I was hearing from this conversation is one, I think we're absolving Bernie Sanders too much of impetus. Jamarl, typically you kind of like say more or less he doesn't have it, or he doesnn't have the chutzpah, or whatever, the splits to like get it across the goal line. He's just not that guy. And I think that's blatantly true, but I think it goes even further to the point where it's like Obama, you apply the same assumption of intellect and if he's aware of how things are playing out, why isn't he talking about these emails? He calls this corruption, superdelegates, blah, blah, blah. And the other point is, I think I agree.
Anthony, man, the connection is so bad.
I'm hearing.
Wait, Anthony, I'm sorry. I've got to cut it. We're losing you. It's getting worse and worse. Broadly, it sounds like you're saying that Bernie Sanders should have known that kind of thing.
Shouldn't get a pass.
Shouldn't get a pass. I can pitch in on that. I think that he should have seen what was coming. This is probably me reading words into what you were saying based on my preconceptions, but he should have seen that he should have known the DNC is going to push back on him real hard. That would hold true in 2016. It would hold particularly true in 2020. So he should have gotten out ahead of that back in the day for sure, but also in his second run, he should have got out ahead of that. He should have stuck himself out there. He shouldn't have been just trying to move the Overton window, which seems to be the consensus right now, is that he was just trying to shift what policies were available for, discussion in the running. Lauren, what's your take?
Well, I ran LA for Bernie. I was a delegate for him. I wrote 2 articles in the LA Progressive prior to him conceding. One of them was called "Don't Do It." It's rumored that concede to Hillary 2 weeks before the convention, even though he promised us a contested convention. I organized the TPP protest on the floor of the convention, even though he sent us a text not to do it. I told him, after when I saw the handwriting on the wall after the California primary in June of that year, I told him personally, whispered in his ear, if they try to steal this nomination from you, run with Jill, you can win it. Because I actually was the one who asked Jill Stein to have people in California, green people in California, vote for Bernie because she was, criticizing him and getting slammed, and I like Jill Stein. So You know, and then I told you I did that criticism on the Russiagate tweets. But I think that Bernie has just been in this institution for too long. He's been in there for 30 years. He doesn't really know at this point how else to operate.
Yeah.
So the way he's operating is the way they all operate, which is why when people have said to me many times, you should run for office, I say I never would, because you have to go along to get along. You have to pick your battles. You have to compromise. You have to make alliances with people that you don't like. And I think this is what Bernie has learned to do and what he's doing. And like I said, unlike the Tea Party, this is what Jamarl and I were talking about last night when I said, you know, I think AOC is very like Bree Joy Gray said, AOC and the squad should be the Tea Party, the left. But that's easy to say because the Tea Party just fights things. They don't care if the people get any benefits. It's very hard for someone like AOC to vote against the CARES Act or the HEROES Act when it has actual tangible benefits to her constituents. Same thing with Bernie. If he can get more people on Medicare and get all these other things covered, that's tangible benefits for people.
Yeah.
And I think that people in the audience, I say the audience, like we're citizens, haven't we?
First and foremost, bringing bread and circuses back up. Yeah, we're not an audience. When we're talking politics, if we're just an audience, then this is, you know, nothing other than an oligarchy, which of course we already kind of got there, but hey.
Well, just to be clear, Lauren, I was talking about the COVID rescue plan, not the CARES Act. We're talking about different things, I think. The vote for the rescue plan in the House was 220 to 211, meaning it's enough where they could crash it. But this is
different conversation. That's like, you know, filibuster politics, which we talk
on some level, yes,
crap about all the time and for good reason. Yeah. I wish there was something more than that, and hopefully we'll get there soon,
I wish there was, but at the point where the president says, I want $15 an hour, you have a House that says $15, and then Joe Manchin says, yeah, I don't think the American worker deserves that.
Yeah.
And then it's like, so what is the House to do? Should the House just walk? No, I don't think they should.
You know, what I found interesting, and you said you don't think people are doing this, I was going to say in addition to blockades and disruptions and occupations, I was going to say general strikes and strikes. And I think you sort of see that happening organically now when you read about the 10 Republican states that took away the unemployment insurance because they wanted to get people back to work. And then you see the article in which they interview the job recruiters, and people are not coming to these.
Yeah.
They don't want these minimum wage jobs anymore. And here in North Carolina, where I've moved, it's $7.25 an hour. I mean, it's despicable. And you also have the Republicans here denying Medicaid expansion that would get 600,000 people health care, and it's totally paid for. And they still won't give it to the people. So I think that people everybody's looking for workers in this town that I live in. Everybody. Restaurants have signs out saying, apologize for slow service, but we're short-staffed. I mean, can you imagine? And I did a show with two Bernie delegates called Occupy COVID-19 and talked about how Bernie could have shifted his campaign to be a mutual aid campaign and, without necessarily, he took the bait of Joe Biden, which is going out and campaigning.
Wait, Lauren, I'm real sorry, but we got a bunch of callers on the line and we're overdue on our break. So I'm going to close this out. But I want to say it was a great conversation. Hopefully we can talk again with you soon. Hope you enjoyed yourself.
Sure, no problem. Thank you for having me on.
Hey, thank you for coming on.
Yes.
Yeah, Lauren Steiner, for those listening, grassroots activist, organizer, fights the privatization of public institutions and public goods. She was very involved with Occupy LA. She started and ran Los Angeles for Bernie Sanders and was a delegate for him at the Democratic National Convention and for her personally. Check her out. She also hosts a twice-weekly live show. That's The Robust Opposition. That show airs Sunday and Wednesday nights at 7 p.m. on her personal Facebook page. Go check it out. You're listening to Fault Lines with Thomas and Stranahan. We're coming back with an abbreviated call-in segment. 202-521-1320 is the phone number. Be right back on the other side of this break.
Fault Lines. We are talking
24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
You are listening.
We give you the most essential out of the endless information space.
Radio Sputnik, telling the untold.
peer into the future with Political Misfits on Thursdays when we analyze the latest trends in news, politics, and culture. Catch us on 105.5 in Washington, D.C., or 102.9 or 104.7 in Kansas City. Achtung, baby.
Fault Lines.
And we're back. You're listening to Fault Lines with Thomas and Stranahan. We're taking your calls, 202-521-1320. And I'm going to waste some of our precious time by giving out the inside news here. This is a sign of the times. Jamarl, we went into the break and we came back. We got callers on the line. I'm technically holding on them. But you were apprehensive. You were like bracing for the tsunami of pushback, which again, sign of the times. The conversation we just had with Lauren Steiner, perfectly amicable, good conversation. I don't feel like that's offensive, but you get the impression that people are going to be up in arms about this.
We'll
and maybe you're right. We'll see. Anyway, let's go to our callers. We have Nate calling in from Atlanta. Nate, you're on the line. What's on your mind?
Hi, and I wanted to call about this last week when my phone was down, and though I do have some disagreements about Laura Steiner and what Jamarl was saying, but I guess there'll be other people calling about that. About Tucker Carlson, my question is, do you think he is currently our best journalist when it comes to national media?
No. When it comes to news TV, maybe.
Yes.
But national media, I would say no.
No, not national media. I wouldn't go to him from news.
But what about
media.
But what about news TV?
As giving like a person who can carry and hold a space, he's good.
What about an anchor? In terms of anchors, or
anchor.
See, I don't trust Tucker. You trust them a lot more than I do.
But do you trust any of them? And if you had to rank them, who'd be at the top of the list?
I don't think there would be one at the top of the list.
Well, that's
at
just
least
a
not now.
Come on.
No, seriously. Now, recently, I haven't necessarily been following mainstream news. It's been a little, it's off kilter. I don't even have
a lot of people
like regular
haven't.
TV to do it.
Like Glenn Greenwald and a lot of other folks talk about. Most people haven't been following mainstream news after Trump got pushed out of office. Whatever, after Trump lost. They haven't been having, their audience is dwindling. I'll put it like that.
Yeah, I don't have the person to go to like that.
Yeah.
Like it used to be, like in the old days, it would be like a Mad Owl, or it would be, believe it or not, even a Sam Cedar, or like a, like that was my growth arc and that stuff, or Keith Olbermann. Olbermann was my big one. I used to love Olbermann.
That's your growth arc.
That was my growth guy, man.
Those are the rings on the tree, man. You can see it. Jamarl's talking about it. Nate, we got a couple other callers. Any other comments there? You asked us a question. What's on your mind?
No, that's all. I mean, I think as an anchor,
I don't hate him.
He's the only.
Yeah, and he hits stuff that others don't.
Yeah,
and he does it sometimes in a more honest way. So
yes,
I don't hate him.
That is the thing. He's the only one out there talking about some relevant things like Syria, for instance. And while we mock him, I don't know. You mock him more than I do. I kind of like Tucker in a lot of ways.
Oh, I don't hate him.
Yeah. Anyway, Nate, thank you for the call. We got Will calling in from Chicago. Will, you are on the line. What is on your mind?
Hey guys, thanks for taking my call. That Lauren lady, she was kind of touching on the subject I want to talk about, which is who is going to be the organizer in chief. When Bernie ran, he kind of talked about this idea that he was going to go to, different states and say that which senators were blocking certain bills from passing, etc. Obama had 2.2 million volunteers. After he won, he disbanded his volunteer base. There was a bunch of people who were ready to start doing lowering strikes at their workplaces and doing direct action who wanted Bernie, regardless of the electoral win, or the electoral loss, rather, to step into this role of organizer-in-chief. That, to a certain degree, is what I think Jimmy Dore wants to be. He's very kind of like a firebrand kind of guy that kind of attracts more lightning, I guess, than he helps. But
Wait, and Will, so here's the thing. You've been muffled very slightly. Your audio quality is not the best. I'm going to try to briefly restate what I heard you saying, which is what you heard in Lauren's conversation, our conversation with her. What you heard her talking about that you liked that she brought up was this idea of a leader for the activist types, for the activist folks in the States, where Bernie potentially could have been that person. But there are a bunch of people who are looking not just for involvement in Congress, but for like street level grassroots activism, organizing general strikes, that kind of thing. And that role right now is empty. There's nobody sitting in that seat. And you're saying, who's that person going to be? Is that broadly right, Will?
yes, that is actually, and maybe it's several people, but when you have AOC with this massive platform, that's where the frustration comes in.
And I agreed. And I don't think either of us know the answer. We got one more call. Will, calling in from Chicago. Thank you. Brave calling in from Atlanta. You're on last again, man. You got 30 seconds here. Sorry we got to you kind of late. Brave, you're on. What's on your mind?
Try to shotgun it. The problem is not that the left is eating its own. The problem is that, because that would suggest that we are all on the same page and we are not. I think that the problem is that there's no leadership. And after Bernie bending the knee and so much of the squad being declawed and just showing weakness and TYT selling us out for $20 million, I think what it is that everybody has their knives out. And they are making sure, or they're trying to make sure, that we don't go through this whole, with CNN and MSNBC and the mainstream did to Bernie, that we don't go through that again. So we are purging. We are purging.
Maybe, but that purge is also a power grab by a few people, and the problem is it's deleterious on the way, and arguably that disempowers you in the long run. I get it. There's like the cleaning house process where you're looking for a leader and you're sort of reestablishing yourselves, but doesn't that leave you weaker? Because it seems like it is right now. I don't mean you personally,
I think
but
it's
the movement.
natural on some level, right? I mean, there's a trauma. The left is trying to resolve this.
I don't know. I think
this
could go a lot better. I think if there were a few viable leaders who are competent enough to beat out the rest of the pack,
there are none.
I just don't think there are right now. It's a bunch of broadcasters, all of whom are like squabbling over political fiefdoms and which clique is gonna win. I don't know. It seems to me to be how it is right now. Sad to say. You guys are listening to Fault Lines. We'll be back tomorrow, folks. Signing off. See you again 7 a.m. Eastern tomorrow. Fault Lines with Thomas and Stranahan.